Support for this and all the free content of Addressing Gettysburg is made possible by our patrons over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. I'm Matt. I'm sitting here with Bob.
Hello,
Bob.
everybody. I've got a special announcement to make, Matt.
Well, can I introduce what this show is first, Bobby?
Well, you're more important than the show.
Well, that's true. But it's the anniversary of July 2nd, and that's what we're talking about today. But you have something you want to say.
And that's more important than Matmas?
What's Matmas, Bob?
Well, Matmas is Matt Callery's birthday.
Oh, yes. It is a glorious day.
Yes.
The sun is shining. The clouds look like an old painting in one of those old Bibles, you know? Just glorious and godly and heavenly, and it is Matmas Day. And I'm a
Are you shutting me up
blasphemer.
so I can't explain Matmas? That's okay.
No, you want to explain it? Go ahead.
Well, Matt believes that if Christ...
No,
you don't want to hear that part?
No. No.
So I'll let the audience figure out what Matmas means. It's Matt's birthday. Matt, happy birthday. We're glad you finally made it to 21 years old. And we're glad your hair grew back.
I can drink.
And, you can drink now.
We're going out for shots tonight.
Legally, anyway.
Yeah. No,
happy birthday, Matt.
You're welcome. It's not, by the way, it's not anything, against Christ here.
I know.
Yeah.
It's just celebrating Mass.
It's a human word, Mass, and it goes after Christ for Christmas, so why not Matmas? That's all. Yeah.
I've said it ever since you first told me.
We celebrate Babaka.
Did the people like Babaka? did the people I gave a tour to today tell you that you were superb?
No.
Well, too bad. They forgot. I told them, give Matt a Matmas present and tell him that he is superb today.
That would be very nice of them if they had done that. But I think you mean the people yesterday, because they did.
No, the bike tour I gave today.
No, they didn't say anything to me.
Well, they should have.
Well, they told me to go to hell, actually.
They were my friends.
I know.
Lon and Laurel, you did not hear that.
No.
Yes.
All right. Anyway, so we're doing July 2nd today. We've got a full boat today, Bobby, don't we?
Yeah, got a lot of good people.
We've got you. We've got Tim Smith. Welcome back, Tim.
Hello.
We've got Jim Pangburn. Welcome back, Jim. Oh, got to turn your mic on there, Jimmy. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Is that what that
Yeah. There you go.
There we go.
You did this yesterday. You did the same thing.
Yeah, I know.
And also returning from yesterday's Charlie Fennell. How you doing, Charlie?
Well, good. Back by popular demand.
Yes, absolutely.
Charlie, are you curling the mustache?
Yeah, I got an inverted and exverted curl going.
Yeah, I was wondering why.
This one's going this way and this one's going this way. So.
Yeah, if you look at one side of your face, it looks great.
Yeah.
But full on,
is that, man?
full on, you look all disheveled.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so we're talking about July 2nd, like I said today. And what an exciting day July 2nd, 1863 was, wasn't it? First, let's start with the general dispositions of the troops of both armies. Tim, why don't you start this one off? Where are they?
Well, I generally say that on July 2nd, and of course, you could preface it by talking about the morning of July 2nd, or you could do the afternoon of July 2nd just before the attack. But I generally try to make it simple and say that the Northern Army is on the hills south and a little east of the town of Gettysburg, and their line's in the shape of a giant fishhook, and it runs from Big and Little Round Top along Cemetery Ridge to Cemetery Hill and curves around the Culp's Hill. And the line from one end to the other is about 3.5 miles. The Southern Army is also in the shape of a giant fishhook, except it's a much larger, much longer fishhook. And it runs from the other side of Culp's Hill near Benner's Hill up and around through the town and out to the seminary and down Seminary Ridge out in, the distance a little south and west of Little Round Top. The Southern Army has a line that's 6 miles long. They have less men. Their line is farther spread out. And during the battle, they're doing all the attacking across open fields, up hills, and into Union artillery fire. Who do you think might have the advantage?
I think it would be the Union.
And, Tim, talk about advantage of interior lines thus.
And then, of course, if Robert E. Lee is in the center of his line, behind the center of his line, and he wants to send a message to one end of the line, it takes quite a while for the messenger to get there. And think about if Robert E. Lee would like to shift reinforcements from one end of the line to the other. He can't do it. Of course, the Northern Army has interior lines of battle, and if General Meade's headquarters in the center, he can get to any point in line very quickly with a messenger, and he can shift reinforcements from Culp's Hill to the area of Little Round Top if he so desires.
And speaking of which, by the way, I didn't say this, we are on Little Round Top at the 155th PA Monument.
And that is a coup, because Charlie Fennell loves Culp's Hill. And
That's
I'm
true.
surprised you're willing to be here at Little Round.
I was on Culp's Hill.
Don't tell Charlie he's not on
It's all
Culp's Hill.
overgrown. I thought it was Culp's Hill.
So Robert E. Lee, though, in the early hours of the morning, sends a guy named Captain Johnston to recon the right, or his right, or the left of the Union line. What comes back from that mission?
Well, Johnson.
Is it John Sun or John Stun?
Stun, yeah.
It's a Stun. Okay.
And he came all the way down. He alleged he got on a Little Round Top. There about 7 men, I guess, in the scouting party. He came up here, and there was nobody on the hill. And that's what they go back and tell Lee. It was about 3 hours. It started a little after 4 in the morning. So they get back around 7:30 and explain to Lee what they saw or didn't see, as the case may be. The big controversy is, did he get the Little Round Top or not, because you got the 3rd Corps just north of Little Round Top in the low ground, and then the 2nd Corps is up on Cemetery Ridge. General Buford's cavalry is out in front of us here in the Valley of Death and out near the Peach Orchard. So you have probably 30,000 men in the area. And, of course, he alleged that they weren't here. And, of course, you also have elements of the 12th Corps on the hill. General Geary is here. He gets up. He's supposed to go to Culp's Hill. He's like me. He's on the wrong hill. And about 5 o'clock or so, he was supposed to wait for Sickles to relieve him. General Sickles does not come, so he leaves. So it's entirely possible in my mind that Johnson got here after Geary left.
Okay.
It's irrelevant what hill he was on.
Right.
He could have been on a hill in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, for all it matters. What it matters is what he tells Lee.
Right. Because Lee is going to take that information and formulate his plan.
And he tells him that the left flank is vulnerable.
It's vulnerable.
Simply put.
Now, where does Lee believe the left flank of the Union Army is by the time the sun goes down on July 1st?
Probably near the Pennsylvania Monument.
Okay. And so he's then hearing that Johnston makes it here to Little Round Top and there are no troops. So he's thinking this whole area is devoid of any Union soldiers.
That's correct. Although Johnson did tell him he encountered, 4 cavalrymen? Mm-hmm. And, of course, if you realize the tactics of the Civil War, once the battle's joined, the cavalry get out of the way. They go to the end of the line. So if Johnson just saw cavalry, that means the Union infantry line doesn't extend this far.
Okay, so then he gets back. Lee has a plan. What, Jim, we haven't heard from you yet. What's his plan?
The plan is basically... Am I on? Okay, we're
Yeah.
on. He wants the main attack to begin on his right against the Union left. He wants to bring James Longstreet, his principal subordinate, with his 2 divisions, Hoods and Mclaws, behind Seminary Ridge, unseen. Pop out over here opposite the Peach Orchard along the Millerstown Road. Take a position beyond the end of the Union line where Charlie mentioned it, about where the Pennsylvania Memorial is. And attack north up along Cemetery Ridge and roll the Union line up like a wet blanket. And then over east of town on the left, the Confederates are going to make a demonstration to lock Union troops at Culp's Hill on the right in place, prevent them from using those interior lines to come against the main attack on the Confederate right. And if the opportunity presents itself and you can turn it into an actual attack, go ahead and do that. So I think he's trying to negate the advantage the Union has, the interior lines. And those guys over there, the Confederates on the far eastern side of town, they're waiting for almost 12 hours, aren't they, Charlie?
Yeah.
I always imagine the tension of being on that Confederate left, and waiting. The orders were to wait to hear the attack over here on the right begin, and then that would be the signal to launch the attack. And sun comes up about 4:30, and these guys don't get started until over 12 hours later. Just imagine the tension
Just
sitting
waiting.
and waiting for that sound. You don't hear it all those hours.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so much is made of Longstreet's march and everything, and there's people have said, he was dragging his heels and he was being, a petulant child or all these different things. But the reality of it is let's kind of like break it down a little bit. What does he have going against him? First of all, when does he get the order to move? When does Lee get the order?
Well, it must be, I think a lot of post-war writers, especially Southern post-war writers, who were trying to, blame Longstreet for failing to get into position early in the morning, try to make it appear as if Lee had issued orders the night before, right, and Longstreet's supposed to move at dawn, and they refer to it as a sunrise attack order, and he's supposed to attack early in the day. But in point of fact, Lee and Longstreet did talk about what they should do on July 2nd and night of July 1st, but no solid plans were made. And then, of course, he went over and talked to, Richard Ewell during the evening of July 1st and
Lee.
His subordinates.
Lee did?
Lee met with Ewell and Early and Rhodes in the town. We argue about exactly where they met and what that meeting was about, but they did meet. And then on the second day, Lee wakes up and Lee thinks about the plan, and then he actually calls a meeting back behind Seminary Ridge with Hood and Mclaws and Longstreet. And there are accounts of this meeting from Longstreet, and there's also a really nice account by Mclaws at this meeting. And I think Mclaws, in the account that he has of it, says that initially Lee had placed him perpendicular to the Emmitsburg Road, as Jim was talking about, and had him attacking up the Emmitsburg Road. And Longstreet said, no, I would like him to form like this, parallel to the Emmitsburg Road. And then Lee said, no, I would like him perpendicular. And Mclaws mentions that during this meeting, Longstreet and Lee don't appear to be on the same page. But I would say, and then, of course, at the meeting, Longstreet points out that Pickett's not up yet, and Law's brigade of Hood's division is not up yet, and he'd like to wait to move before he gets into position. It must be, and I don't know what you guys think, around 11 o'clock before there's any kind of solid even orders of what they're going to do.
Right. And he's still got to wait for Law after that, and Law doesn't get here till what, maybe 11:45 or 11:30 or something like that. So Longstreet doesn't get off until noon or so. At that meeting, did Lee ask Barksdale if Mississippi is ready?
Very good. I had forgotten that, like most people's impression of this meeting takes place at the Slider farm in the movie Gettysburg. Yes. And I Heath is at that meeting, wounded.
He doesn't know who he is.
He doesn't know where he is. Yeah. So Longstreet gets moving, and then what happens along the way that adds to the time? And actually, go ahead. Start with that, Jim. Go ahead.
Well, Longstreet basically starts the attack up along Her Ridge, out there west of town where the first day's fight was, and is trying to come around a direct line somewhat around Bream's Mill, near where the Black Horse Tavern is. Okay. And he comes across, is it what's the name of the ridge? Is it Bream's Ridge?
Bream's Hill.
Bream's Hill. Comes over, crests the ridge with his men in column. Can see the heights here on the Union left where we are, the Round Tops.
And what's the problem with that?
Well, he knows that the Union Army will have the signal corps on high ground like this, communications personnel, and that they'll detect his movement against the Union left. And the idea of arriving on the Union left as somewhat of a surprise, be able to attack the Union Army before they can really react, would be lost. So he turns around, engages in a countermarch where he retraces some of his steps and tries to come in further, closer behind Seminary Ridge using the trees as a screen. And this is what ends up taking him so long to get here. And what's ironic about that is his artillery commander, Porter Alexander, finds a way down below Bream's Hill and then down along Marsh Creek and comes out further down what is Black Horse Tavern Road today, and finds a way to get around without being seen. And Longstreet doesn't really pay too much attention to that and brings the infantry back in the countermarch. So he doesn't show up here opposite the Peach Orchard. Union left until about, 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
There's a few things about this I always like to point out. And I think what ends up happening is, since there's so much stuff written about Longstreet that makes him look like it's his fault or he's the bad guy, sometimes as guides we get in a position where we throw out things that to help defend Longstreet. Maybe he doesn't need defending, but it's just that there's so many books that attack him for this problem. Early on, Longstreet wanted to send a scout out to figure out how to get down to here, and he actually, I forget who it was, he was trying to order down here, and Lee said, no, I'll take care of that. And then, I think Captain Johnson was supposed to find around. Then he didn't do it. And then, the head of the column gets up on top of Reams Hill and looks out and sees the signal station on Little Round Top, and they call Longstreet for it, and he looks up and he says, "Look at this!" He's pissed.
Yeah.
So he orders the countermarch.
Captain Johnston hadn't done that. He did not take that circuitous route.
Sir, what route?
That road. That word I can't say.
Circuitous.
That road. That word.
Yeah.
He did not take the same route. So he had never actually, tell me if I'm wrong, but he had never actually gone the way Longstreet's Corps is trying to go in this.
And just let me give you just a couple simple things about the countermarch
route.
First of all, it only takes up like 45 minutes. People are making too much out of this. They make it make it sound like it's an hour. He leaves his camp and he goes a quarter of a mile, and then he turns around and goes back to camp, and then takes a slightly different route. It takes like 45 minutes. It's not that big of a deal.
Okay.
It's not hours that is spent on this.
All right. Fair
Secondly,
it's not as dramatic, too.
Yeah, it's not as dramatic. The signal station sees the troops and reports it. But guess what? They see him going in the other direction towards the north and the east, and they report that. They see the countermarch going back, and they report that, which is kind of funny. They don't report him coming this way. They report him going the other way.
Well, so we have a question, though, about that might fit in with that there. Listener Thomas 6, he wants to know, how reasonable was it for the Confederates to think they could march that many men, horses, and cannons over dirt roads and not create dust clouds that would be seen by the Union Army? Doesn't make sense to him. Did it rain earlier that day or the day before? No. Okay.
There's accounts of dust clouds on June 30th, and I would say there would be dust clouds.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that I think is fascinating. Just step back a second, and we'll let Charlie add to it, because Charlie, I'm sure, has lots of ideas, too, about this. But think about this. Robert E. Lee, on the early morning of July 2nd, is sitting over there. He had the advantage in numbers on July 1st. He knows he has the advantage of numbers on the morning of July 2nd. It would behoove him to attack early in the day. And yet, his idea is, let's march behind a ridge and 4 miles down in that direction, and then, what? You need to attack now! Bring up the troops and attack!
Yeah, why doesn't he, though?
He comes up with a plan that is going to occupy most of the day to implement. And by that time, we know, of course he doesn't know this, that the entire Northern Army is going to arrive before he attacks. Mm-hmm. And he could have attacked earlier while he still had the advantage of numbers, and he didn't.
Interesting.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Charlie.
Hard to believe that Robert E. Lee made a mistake.
Perhaps. No, the problem you have is information. We go back to what we said yesterday. The biggest failure of the Confederate Army here is information.
Right.
So Lee has to get information. Lee believes the Union Army is twice the size it is. He thinks it's to double the size of his army.
Double the size of what it really is, or double the size of
the size of the Confederate
Army.
What he
knows. Okay. Yeah.
So he's
gotcha.
looking at 150,000 men.
Yeah.
Which is not. It's barely a little over 90,000.
Okay.
Okay. And so the problem is he's got to get information. He's in enemy territory without reconnaissance. And I agree with Tim. You got to attack early, but where do you attack? If they had thrown Ewell in the morning, there was nobody in his way along Rock Creek. That could have been a disaster for the Union forces.
Yeah.
But, Lee doesn't know that.
Yeah, why not just resume from where you left off yesterday?
How about Anderson's division?
Yeah, where are they? Yeah.
Right.
Well, he's looking at the high ground. Okay, if all the hills, the Three Stooges here, Cemetery Hill, Culp's Hill, Little Round Top,
right,
are all steeper, more rugged to the north.
Yeah.
They're all that way. If you look at it from looking south, you see the rugged nature of that ground. He suggested to Ewell to attack, and Ewell said, I don't want to make a frontal attack on this ground. Wolf Hill, Cemetery, Culp's Hill, and Cemetery Hill.
Yeah.
He said the ground is not conducive.
Yeah, you're right. That's pretty rough ground there. Yeah.
The night before, does not Longstreet try to talk Lee out of staying and resuming attacks?
Yeah, let's get to that. Okay.
Go ahead.
This is one of the big speculations of the Battle of Gettysburg. If you watch the movie, Longstreet's right. And you wonder why Lee's in Never Never Land. He's trying to find Peter Pan and Captain Hook. Okay? He's out of touch with reality if you take the movie. Mm-hmm. Okay? And Longstreet suggests to move the Confederate Army around behind the Union Army and get it between the Union Army and Washington, D.C., put it on high ground of our choosing, as Longstreet said, and force them to attack to regain their line of communications. Mm-hmm. So we could fight at Fredericksburg somewhere between here and Washington, D.C., and everybody says, yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, well, let me tell you something. That battle was already fought. That battle was already fought. Longstreet suggesting Lee do the same thing that Hooker did at Chancellorsville. Hooker did exactly what Longstreet's telling Lee to do here. He got around behind the Confederate Army, got astride his line of communications, Charlottesville, and then dug in. Come and get me. Okay?
Yeah.
And I wonder who won that battle. Okay, Longstreet wasn't there.
Yeah, and let's not forget, neither is Stuart here yet when Longstreet is proposing this.
And how do you move an army without your eyes?
We get a lot of this on tours because it's, people have their impressions of what I think. Everybody can look. You look at what happened, and everybody says, "You know what? I think something else is probably a better idea."
Yeah.
So they come up with all these other things.
Absolutely.
And let me just, I love that. There is absolutely no way for Robert E. Lee's army to move around the Northern Army on this side of the South Mountain Range. There are no roads that go around it. How are you supposed to swing around the Northern Army into its advance?
Exactly. It's not practical. First of all, these guys have been fighting all day. They're exhausted. And what are you going to do? You're going to pick them up, put them in column formation within sight of the enemy, where you're vulnerable to attack with no cavalry screen. And like you said, Tim, and you're heading in the direction they're coming from. And even if you could get between here and Washington, now you've got the Army of the Potomac, almost 100,000 men on one side, and the garrison of Washington with an equal number on the other side, cut off from communications and supply.
It just doesn't make any sense.
No.
And I think Lee knew that.
Commander.
Yes.
Because he said something like, if they're there tomorrow, we're going to strike them, and we're going to whip them, or they're going to whip us.
But when you establish dominance over an adversary, which Lee has done, you don't want to give them any reason to believe they can beat you. Mm-hmm. By pulling back after the first day, the North might take confidence in that. Mm-hmm. And Lee can't afford that. He spent a year establishing moral supremacy over the Army of the Potomac. And he's not about to lose it here. That's why he says in his report that a battle became unavoidable.
Yeah.
Once this battle starts, we got to finish it.
Wants to maintain the initiative.
Exactly.
Right. So you mentioned Stuart, Bob, and excuse me. I alluded to the meeting scene in the movie before, but also with the movie, they put Stuart arriving in the evening when Longstreet's basically reporting to Lee about everything that happened that day. But that's not true. Stuart arrived when? Around noon-ish?
Early afternoon. He comes personally. His troops aren't with him, though.
Right.
Yeah.
He comes, yeah.
Right.
So it's not. So Longstreet's already on the move down here when Stuart arrives.
Yes.
Okay, so there's no comment about the prodigal son returning or anything like that.
But in the afternoon, Stuart's fighting a battle at Hunterstown. Isn't that the afternoon of the second?
Yeah, part of Stuart.
Yeah,
part of Stuart.
Right.
Hampton.
But his men are close enough. They're within 4 miles
Now,
of Hunterstown.
Since you mentioned the movie, I think they just edited out of context. That was filmed to be during the day. If you remember, it's still daylight when Stuart arrives at Lee's headquarters.
Yeah, it looks more like dusk, though.
Yeah. So, but there's a lot of things that happen in the movie that are kind of out of context. Like, for instance, there's a fighting on Little Round Top, and then after the fighting on Little Round Top, Longstreet goes to visit Hood in the hospital. Still daylight.
Right.
Jeb Stuart comes to visit Lee. It's still daylight.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
You
movies.
can't film in dark. Nobody can see anything.
And it is a movie from Hollywood.
I know, but a lot of
based
people,
on a novel, so
but a
let's
lot
not be
of
too hard.
people watch the movie. That's how they know their history and stuff. And so, I just want to make sure that we're clarifying things here for them. Okay, so a big thing that's going to interfere with Longstreet's move, though, is this guy from New York in command of the 3rd Corps, Tim's favorite, Daniel Sickles. What does Sickles do that kind of throws a wrench in the gears of Longstreet's plan?
Well, it's going to disturb the plans of both armies because General Meade had based his plans that day on General Sickles' 3rd Army Corps coming up that morning and relieving the Union line along extending from Cemetery Ridge, to Little Round Top. And specifically in Little Round Top, he was ordered to take position where Geary's division of the 12th Army Corps had spent the night. And we know where they spent the day. Monuments of Little Round Top showing us where they spent the night. Yeah. We're not far from their monuments.
Right.
But, of course, they leave before Sickles gets here, and Sickles pretends like he never knows where that position was, So Sickles basically arrives. Some of his men arrived the night before and are actually camped out in the fields just north of Little Round Top around the Weichert farm. And some of them camp in the peach orchard that night. They're coming up from Emmitsburg. And, by the time Sickles gets his all men aligned, he simply decides that he would prefer to have his troops in front of Little Round Top instead of on Little Round Top. Now, there's a lot written about it. Sickles maintains throughout his writing that his orders were kind of vague, and he kept asking Meade to clarify his orders. I think Meade's orders are pretty simple, and he just doesn't want to follow them and keeps asking for orders that he wants
to have.
Do we know if Sickles ever stood on Little Round Top?
That's a good question. We don't know that Sickles himself was ever on Little Round Top.
Wasn't here till 1883.
That's right.
I don't think he stood here during the battle.
No.
Honestly, I don't think anybody, even Sickles, maybe I'm giving it too much credit, but I don't think anybody could see this view and then knowingly abandon the hill.
Right.
When you look at the terrain here, guys, and where his headquarters was between here and the Pennsylvania Memorial and back behind the trees close to Tawnytown Road, what do you see?
Lowland.
All you see is trees. You have to come up here and stand here to understand the value of this hill. I don't think he ever came up here.
When I wrote the Devil's Den book, I didn't want to talk much about Sickles, because I could have written a book about Sickles, but it wouldn't have been very complimentary.
Okay.
So anyway, I just decided that I'd pick one of his quotes. So I picked this quote from Dan Sickles. I think it's like 1891. He's writing an article. So listen to him himself and see if you can understand why he moved forward here. The early morning of July 2nd was spent reconnoitering my front and my left, choosing positions, gathering information about the roads, and learning somewhat of the force of the dispositions of the enemy. The prolongation of the line of Cemetery Ridge, perhaps the more desirable tactical position for me to occupy, unless overruled by superior considerations, proved upon examination to be unsatisfactory. What? Okay.
Yeah.
The most commanding position on the field was Little Round Top and the ridge running from it towards the Emmitsburg Road. Moreover, to abandon the Emmitsburg Road to the enemy would be unpardonable.
Okay.
So he tried to make it sound, there's all kinds of things in there.
Yeah.
But he tries to make it sound like Little Round Top. There's a ridge that runs from it out towards the Emmitsburg Road.
Right.
I would basically... I have my theories. Everybody has those theories because Sickles. I think the basic problem we have when we read anything that Sickles writes is we know he's lying.
Right.
So how do you sift through his lies and determine what is actually the truth?
Right.
That's our problem.
You probably listen to everybody else.
And it is hard because there is a reason. There is something going on here. But what is it? And I suggest, now this is way out there, guys. You guys might hear me say this, and you're going to say, "What the hell's Tim talking about?" I think Sickles knows his days are numbered. Meade has taken command of the army. Meade doesn't like Sickles. He's been reprimanded several times in the last couple of days on the march here. He is not going to survive Meade's reign as commander of the Army of the Potomac. He's going to be out of here. And Meade has relegated him to this backwater area at the end of the line, and all the fighting took place out there in the fields of July 1st. And I think he makes a forward movement to get into position where he can be part of the upcoming battle instead of relegated back here.
So you don't think the Hazel Grove...
That's crazy. You don't hear a lot of people say what I just said.
I just heard you say it.
I think Hazel Grove at Chancellorsville is a convenient excuse that somebody pointed out to him after the war that he uses later.
Yeah.
Oh.
But you don't think Hazel Grove, Fairview Heights had anything to do with this?
No. But that's all right. I'm just saying that, but that's all right. People say that.
You're okay, Jim.
Yeah, that's all right.
That.
You can say that. You can bring that up here in a minute.
Okay.
But I just wanted to say this then. In Sickles' defense,
Yeah.
he basically figures that he can defend Little Round Top by being in front of it.
Yeah.
And granted, the last known position in the Confederate Army is north and west of the town where the first day of the battle was fought. He has no idea that the Southern Army, no one has any idea in the Northern High Command, that the Southern Army is marching to get into position, and all of a sudden they're going to appear on the end of the line, and they're going to be able to, overwhelm his flank.
But when does he send skirmishers out there?
Well, he was ordered to send skirmishers out to develop, the end of the Southern line early in the morning. And
the end of what they knew was the Southern line.
Yeah, and, of course, that has nothing to do. Longstreet made a, I don't know, what would you call it, a misstatement? No, I don't think he did it on purpose, but he lent some credence to Sickles' forward movement and this reconnaissance by after the war, when he and Sickles were friends, he said that when Sickles moved forward, he uncovered my movements to the south, and somehow that has something to do with his forward movement.
And didn't he claim that he basically saved his move going out there?
Basically, in the end, and we'll let you guys talk. Don't worry, I'm gonna stop talking here. Basically, his forward movement disrupted the plans of the Southern and Northern Army during the battle.
Right.
When he moved forward to the Peach Orchard, and Lafayette and Mclaws, as the lead division, got up there and was going to take a position perpendicular on the Emmitsburg Road at the Peach Orchard, he couldn't because Sickles was in it. And the Southern plan had to change all of a sudden. And then, because Sickles had moved forward, and he wasn't in the position he was supposed to be, and all of a sudden the flank was vulnerable, General Meade was forced to shift 20,000 reinforcements into this area of the battlefield. And Sickles' followers or supporters would argue that he inadvertently created a defense in depth that actually won the battle for the Northern Army.
And we call those Sickles fans?
I don't know what we call them. Sickles fans. Sickles fans. Yeah, what do we call people who get overboard?
Sickles fans. I just coined the phrase.
Spread
it, everybody.
We need a good term for that.
I just gave you one. Sickles fans.
Okay.
I'll say creating a defense in depth assumes you've got a second line behind you.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a few things. Just let me say this, and then I'm going to stop talking about Sickles.
That's what he said 20 minutes ago, Charlie.
When he moves forward against orders, he leaves Little Round Top unoccupied.
Right. So he moves forward against orders.
Yeah.
He's requested how many times? 3 times or so?
4 times, Meade.
4 times, and every time Meade says no. What's the story? Isn't there a story Meade comes out?
Well, how about this?
Okay.
How about you just listen and do what you're told and stop
it's
sending
my
messengers?
show, Tim. That's why I'm not going to just listen and do what I told. No, but I know. So what's the story where Meade goes out to talk with him, and then the artillery opens up? Is this a true story? Or is this one of these legends?
Well, what happened was at 3 p.m. they were supposed to have a meeting at Meade's headquarters, and at that meeting, the Corps commanders were supposed to assemble. That was a bad time to have a meeting of the Corps commanders. But they were going to have a Corps commander meeting, and just before Sickles rode up, somebody said, hey, he's moved his troops out all along the Emmitsburg Road. And when Sickles rode up to the Meade's headquarters, Meade said, get back to your line, I'll be out to deal with you in a minute. And then Meade...
What he said?
Well, the most, I think... That's what he said. I'm just
qualifying
this. But I think the most important decision that anyone made on the second day's battlefield was made by Meade while he was at headquarters and before he rode out to have it out with that idiot Sickles. Meade's at his headquarters. He sends Sickles away, and he orders for the 5th Army Corps to march from the Baltimore Pike into this area because he smells trouble.
Okay.
And then he rides out to have it out with Sickles. So he's already put the 5th Corps in motion. What I don't like is authors who write about all this and just pretend like Vincent's brigade suddenly appears over here at the base of Little Round Top and they saved the hill without giving Meade credit for having ordered them over here.
Because it's pretty early on that they're down there.
Yeah.
Right. So they're already en route.
So they're all the way here. So Meade rides out to have it out with Sickles. And then, of course, another important event that occurs on the second day is when he stops his staff between, and we can look out and see it, the Weichert Woods and the Trossel Woods, and points over here and orders his chief of engineers to ride to Little Round Top and check out the situation. And Warren leaves the comm and rides out here. And then, of course, Meade rides out and has it out with Sickles. And according to all accounts, we don't know what was exactly said, but there were some choice words.
A heated conversation.
Was that what it is? Yeah. Okay, I'm done. Oh, one other thing. I'm not done. I'm not done. And you know what I really like if I'm really getting stirred up by the Sickles agitators?
What do you like when you're stirred up?
I do get stirred up.
I know.
On Little Round Top, and they'll defend Sickles. I'll be like, Sickles' forward movement is like you're in a fist fight. and you break the other guy's hand with your face.
Right, okay. Very good.
Sickles is a speed bump.
Yeah.
Now, a little balancing here, Charlie or Jim. If you don't, I'm not a Sickles apologist.
Yeah.
Okay, but I
Devil's
do
advocate.
think we ought. Yeah, devil's advocate. Now, I do think we ought to get a little bit of defense of him.
Well, I think
you
the
do
most
that.
significant decision made on July 2nd is Sickles. Not me moving forward. And and I think to go back, he wanted to move up there the Emmitsburg Road line, Peach Orchard, because it afforded a better artillery position. If you read his correspondence with Meade, he's alleging that his chief of artillery is having trouble locating the guns. Eventually, doesn't Hunt come down?
Yep.
And they ride up the Wheatfield Road.
Hunt is the commander
of Union Artillery, and they go up there and they stop at the stop sign, of course, and then take a right. And by that time, there's some firing over towards Culp's Hill, and Hunt basically said, "I better go check it out." And Sickles asked, "Well, what do you think about this position?" And supposedly Hunt sort of nonchalantly said, "Well, it's a hell of a lot better position than the one you're on." And Sickles said, "Do I have your permission to move forward?" He said, "Absolutely not. You got to get the boss's permission for that, Meade." And he leaves him.
And Hunt is speaking from an artillerist perspective.
Absolutely. But he also suggested, I would check out those woods in front of you to see what's there. Remember, one of the problems Sickles has is Buford's not here now.
Right.
I nailed him on the last program.
Oh, did you? Did you? Who, Buford? Oh, okay. Yeah. That's why you weren't asked to be there yesterday. See what happens? See if you come back and do a July 2nd program again. Anyway, Sickles is in the dark. It was supposed to be replaced, right? Pleasanton, who we know is perhaps the greatest cavalry commander in the war in his own mind,
so he'd have
did not replace cavalry on the left flank. So Sickles is in the dark.
And this is very worrisome to Sickles.
It is.
Because you want cavalry to provide information and to protect your flank.
He can't see where he is.
Right. And does Sickles, does he have some empirical evidence that there may be an attack coming from the southwest?
Well, he said, Hunt suggested, and
Anderson's division, when he sent the sharpshooters down there and the 3rd Maine.
Well,
they're coming back saying there's a buildup of forces as Anderson's coming into place.
Hiram Berdan. And he takes elements of the 1st sharpshooters and the 3rd Maine, and they go out. I think they go out the road here. I don't think they go way down at the Slider farm.
Okay.
I think they go straight out, and then they work their way north on Warfield Ridge, and they run into Confederate soldiers, part of Anderson's division. There was Wilcox's Alabamians and some Floridians as well. They're extending the line, waiting for Longstreet to come up. And, of course, they exchange pleasantries for a few minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, and they come back and tell Sickles there's a lot of troops in your front.
Okay.
And this is when Sickles, this is around noon, I guess, by the time they get back, a little before noon. And this sort of prompts Sickles to ask Meade again, do I have your permission to locate my men as I see fit? And Meade says, yes, within the parameters of the general instructions you have already been given. Okay? And, of course, what Meade doesn't realize is the general instructions are too general for General Sickles.
Right.
And I believe in many ways, Sickles, being the lawyer he is building a case to do what he wants to do. Remember, he's not court-martialed. He's not court-martialed, nor was he censored by the Committee on the Conduct of the War.
But, of course, that was a congressional committee.
That's right.
And before the war, Sickles was.
That's crap.
Oh, come on now.
His friends are on the conduct of the Committee of the War.
That's my point, Tim.
True,
I was trying to help you.
The only reason he's not censored a court-martial is because he lost his leg and he never returns to the Army.
He didn't lose it. I know where it is.
Yeah, we've seen it.
If he was not allowed to return.
Right. And Meade used the leg as an excuse.
I think that, it's interesting, just an aside, I don't want to get talking, aside, is that he probably would have been court-martialed if he didn't lose his leg and is not in command again.
Mm-hmm. Well, Sickles' final retort to what's going on here, he said, Sickles finally will say, we won, didn't we?
Yeah, right.
There's no guarantee that we would have won if I'd have stayed where I was, where Meade wanted me to stay. There's
Right.
no guarantee.
Of course, Sickles hates Meade.
Yeah, sure.
They're going to hate each other the rest of their lives.
Sickles has a different moral compass than Meade.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We
It's
probably
like
need
when you
to
get to
move
the
on.
North Pole and it just
Yeah,
goes
yeah.
haywire.
But Matt, it would be fun to have just a Sickles versus Meade night.
Okay.
Because Jim has been really quiet, and we all know how much he loves Meade.
He's a big Meade fan.
I thought he was a Sickles guy.
Only when
It's
he's sick.
interesting that, I think one thing is interesting. We mentioned this with Jim Hessler the other day, is Sickles almost forces you to take sides.
Yeah.
He does, yes.
It's hard to be in the middle, isn't it?
Yep.
Absolutely.
He was.
It's not too unlike
He's in the middle. He's between the Union and Confederate lines. Drum roll. Yeah, you're right. He does force you to take sides.
All right.
He really does.
So then let's move on. Then let's get to when the battle commences. How are the troops arrayed here, et cetera, et cetera? Jim, you haven't spoken in a while. Why don't you take this?
After Sickles' forward movement,
Sickles is forward. Longstreet is moving out now. He's getting into position. How does the battle go?
well, instead of Sickles being along Cemetery Ridge and running his line up here to Little Round Top to the south, he's moving out to the west. His far left, and hence the Union left, will now be at Devil's Den. From there, the Union line runs at somewhat of an oblique angle to the northwest up to the Peach Orchard, where the middle of his line forms a salient at the intersection of the Millerstown or Wheatfoot Road and the Emmitsburg Road on top of the ridge. And then his line picks up the Emmitsburg Road ridge, and his right wing runs all the way down the road, right along the road to the Kadori Farm on the far right.
Now, from Devil's Den to the Peach Orchard, that's not a solid line of infantry, right?
No, it's broken up somewhat by the terrain. He kind of skirts the wheat field a little bit. And yeah, it is broken.
And does he have to put like several batteries in one point to fill in a gap right just east of the Peach Orchard? Is that right?
Yes.
Because he doesn't have enough infantry.
Artillery.
I guess the point I'm trying to
Yeah,
make, and
kinda close the
maybe
gap.
I'm wrong, but he doesn't have enough men to cover the ground well.
Yeah, he's covering a longer line out there where he advances to than this line that he was assigned to. Yeah.
Right.
And remember, Tim said 20,000 men are coming here. Some of those are the artillery reserve under Colonel Freeman McGilvery. And so they are going to help fill in. They're supposed to have a regiment on each side of each battery. They don't have that.
So those batteries are later that I'm talking about.
I think Hunt has something to do with those batteries
Yeah,
being brought
yes.
over.
Okay.
So they do arrive in a timely fashion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the Confederate line, Longstreet's divisions of Hood and Mclaws. Let's start from Longstreet's right and work our way north. What divisions do we have, and how are the brigades arrayed?
Well, it's interesting because you have 2 divisions and 8 brigades, Longstreet's. Hood's on the right, and he's supposed to start the attack. In the front, on the extreme right, you have Law's Alabamians. To their immediate left would be Robertson's Texans, and they didn't know where to put the Arkansas troops, so I put them with the Texans
Third
there.
Arkansas.
And then behind them, you have 2 brigades of Georgians. Okay, you have Benning, and you have Tige Anderson. And then immediately to the left of Hood, you have Mclaws, whose division is arranged in 2 lines of 2 brigades. On the right would be Kershaw's South Carolinians, and on the left of him would be Barksdale's Mississippians, and they're straddling the Millerstown Road.
Okay.
Okay, and behind them are Georgians. Okay, you have Semmes and you have Wolford there, and so in the front you have a hodgepodge of Southerners from the Deep South, and behind are all the Georgians.
To make sure the other states move forward.
Well, yeah, that's why the Georgia Monument's placed over there, but that's the way it's arranged.
Okay.
Okay, and just to get on the attack, I notice it's here the advance of Hood. Hood, he wants to go around like Longstreet.
Yeah.
He wants to go around, and he petitions Longstreet at least 3 times. He had sent out scouts, and he noticed that there was nobody here on this hill, and there was nobody behind it except wagons. So he wants to swing around, and Longstreet says, no, you got to tack up the Emmitsburg Road. He asks again, no, you got to tack up the Emmitsburg Road. Finally, he sends an officer who had served with Longstreet in pre-war, and they're kind of friendly, and they know one another. Go explain it to him. And when this guy comes back, he brings Longstreet with him. And so Longstreet explains to Hood, that I know you want to go around. How long do you think it's going to take you? It'd probably take Hood at least an hour to an hour and a half to move his division and artillery around to get on the Taneytown Road behind Little Round Top where we're sitting. And now you're looking at what, 3:30, 3 o'clock, 3:30. That's 4 o'clock, 4:30 our time. How much time do you have left?
Yeah.
Keep in mind that it got dark then around 7:30,
That's what I'm
not
saying.
9 o'clock
Yeah,
like it does now.
we don't fool the clocks. That's a Democratic thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Woodrow Wilson. World War I. But anyway, and so it's going to get dark sooner than it would today, for example, according to the clock. The other thing he points out is that Lee wants us to attack up the Emmitsburg Road. I argued with him all morning. He would have none of it. So attack up the Emmitsburg Road. And then, although it's not specifically spelled out, I'm pretty sure he looked at him and said, "Don't you think they know we're here now?" Okay, because there's artillery fire when they're having this discussion.
So let me ask you this, Charlie.
Sure.
Because we get on our tours all the time, people standing there. We get out there. You probably every tour I give, the person says, who's read the book or
Watched
the movie,
yeah.
and says, "Oh, they should have listened to Hood." It's such a good idea. It's a stupid idea.
It's stupid.
Let me ask you this. I want to ask Charlie a question.
Okay.
What are the rest of the Confederates supposed to do for an hour standing over that ridge while Hood makes his movement? Oh, is that General Sickles? Hey! What do they do for an hour in sight of the Union Army while they're waiting for this secret movement?
They can play cards.
And the distance between Barksdale's line and Graham's
It's a quarter
brigade at the
mile.
Peach Orchard, what?
It's a quarter mile.
Yeah.
It's not very far.
You could holler out to those guys.
Yeah.
I mean,
And there's contact, there's fire.
What are they
Right.
supposed to do?
Yeah, I know. I mean,
Plus,
Well, how about
every time you extend your line, you're thinning your line out.
and we've already said how thin it was, right, Tim?
Right.
It's already a thin line. Let's make it
And
thinner.
here I know what Jim likes this part. Let me ask you this, Jim. Here's another good question for these people, that we have to answer all the time. What would happen if Hood let's say Hood takes just his division and leaves and goes around behind Big Round Top, and it takes him an hour? Who's going to be on the other side of Big Round Top in an hour that he might have to deal with?
Something called the Sixth Corps.
Yeah.
16,000 men by
Army.
far, the biggest corps in the Army of the Potomac.
Outnumbers his division more than 2-1.
They don't touch on that in the movie.
No, you're not allowed to move other people.
No.
Again, with a comment I made just comment earlier. What happens doesn't work.
Right.
So everybody thinks that any other idea is much better.
Right.
Sure.
And they're always looking for a way for the Confederates to win this battle.
Yes.
And they just can't accept that it's over. Like, they lost, All right, so the battle takes place. Now, let's talk about Warren a little bit. And this is where, so this is confusing the way this whole fight down here, timeline-wise, confuses people a lot. So let's try to demystify it if we can. How does it go? When Hood's right starts moving, first of all, Hood and Mclaws, they're not all coming in at once.
No.
So explain the idea of the attack.
Longstreet decided to attack in what is called an echelon. That means from one end of the line to the other. It's like climbing a ladder, one rung at a time.
Okay.
It's a French term. And so he sends in 2 brigades, and that would be Law and, of course, Robertson. And then he holds back the other 2 brigades in Hood. So about 15, 20 minutes later, then they move into support. And then another half an hour or so later, after they move, then you may push Kershaw in, and then Barksdale, and then Sams, and then Wofford. It takes him almost 2 hours to get his entire, 2 divisions engaged.
Okay.
Which allows Meade time to shift those 20,000 troops from one end of his line to the other. Supposedly, Lee mentioned an echelon attack, although if you look at it carefully, the echelon is hill. Mm-hmm. As these 2 divisions, if the plan goes according to Lee, and they start moving up the Emmitsburg Road, moving north towards Cemetery Hill, which is the key objective, Hill's men then, as that attack comes in front of them, they are to join in. And so Lee will mass a strength against the vulnerable salient of the Union line, Cemetery Hill. That was the way the attack was supposed to go. For whatever reason, either Longstreet didn't understand the echelon, or because of Sickles' move, he decided to alter it, or the echelon attack would allow him to develop what's in front of him. Because as part of his men move forward, they're going to get a reaction. And this would allow him to understand or to see what he's up against.
Okay.
And maybe create an opportunity as they're shifting troops to meet the attack. A hole would develop somewhere, perhaps down the line, or a weak spot would be developed. So that's the way the attack was moving.
Okay. So does Warren see the attack, or does Warren see Hood's men or the Confederates? Does he know that they're out there? What's the story with him having Smith's battery fire into the woods?
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that too. Tim would probably he can correct me because I'm going to tell it wrong. But anyway, as Meade, the artillery is starting to fire when Sickles arrives at Meade's headquarters. And Meade was getting ready to go, and he told Sickles, "Don't dismount. We're going to go out and see what's going on." He rides past where Sickles was supposed to be, and he isn't there. So we know that story as they go out. As he's moving forward, and he realizes Sickles is in front of where he's supposed to be, he ordered Warren to come up on this hill and see if the flank's still secure.
Okay.
So Warren comes up here in a signal station on a hill, and they're getting ready to leave. And Warren said, "What are you leaving for?" And they point out into the woods beyond Devil's Den. There's the Confederates. And so Warren looks over and sees that the Confederate line is longer than the Union line. The great story is he sent a staff officer down to Smith's battery in Devil's Den to fire, and then all the Confederates turned, and he could see the glistening of the gun barrels. Mm-hmm. And so then he knew how long the line was. Okay? I don't know that Smith's battery history makes no mention of that.
No, and if the story is true, he would have had to send a courier down to the section in the valley.
Okay.
And doesn't make much sense to me about that part of the story is that there probably was an artillery duel taking place at that time between Confederate artillery on Seminary Ridge and Union artillery, that already.
Right.
So maybe he didn't have to order. Maybe that's the part that's kind of not true. Maybe just an artillery round from somewhere in the peach orchard went down the line and he saw the bayonets flash.
Right.
So now, one thing I should point out is there have been people who have written that the story is not true, that he could not possibly see the flash of the bayonets, or they question that part of it. And as tour guides, we're on Little Round Top every day in the summer, and you look out there in the afternoon, and cars ride by, and you see the sun bouncing off the windshield.
Yeah.
And every time that happens, I'm like, wow, that part's true.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
So, the thing, we're always put in this position. We get these accounts by these men that are written years later, and we're looking at every word they wrote years later, and we're this part's true, this part's not true, and who are we to decide?
Right.
We don't really know.
Well, I have a question though. Wait, so and I'm horrible at math in my head, so help me out here. They don't have daylight savings time. It's getting dark around 7:30. Mm-hmm. This is taking place around 4, 3:30, 4.
Yeah, probably around 4.
So isn't the sun closer to the way it is now?
Oh, yeah, it's in your eyes.
Because, in the afternoon, the sun is up here, and you can see. But now my second question is, are Hood's men in the woods or in front of the woods out there?
I'd imagine they're in the edge of the woods.
Yeah.
So
Artillery's in front of the woods.
If the sun is back there, and they're in those woods, how's anything?
You
can?
And the sun was higher.
The other thing that's going on,
the sun's higher than it is now.
Okay, higher, but it's still there. It's not there.
Okay.
No, you know what I'm saying? It makes its way over there to the west.
I understand.
Yeah. In other words, it's backlit, and they're in the shade.
Yes.
So how's it going to glint in the shade?
What does Warren say when he realizes
Wasn't Warren crazy?
the Confederate line flanks Sickles?
He said something like that it was exciting and horrifying at the same time.
He said he was appalled.
Yeah. I usually say exhilarated, appalling and exhilarating.
Right.
Yeah. Which would be true.
Yeah, he wrote this letter we're talking about, I think, in 1876.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it's in the letter is actually in the back of the 140th New York book, or is it's written to a guy in 140th New York, the letter. Maybe it's also in Oliver Norton's Attack and Defense at Little Round Top.
Okay.
Just in case somebody wants to read it.
Yeah.
All right, so Devil's Den fight goes on, works its way up. You
should mention the important part that we didn't finish was that Warren detects where the line is. He realizes Little Round Top is unoccupied, and he sends couriers off in different directions to bring troops to the top of the hill. And one of those couriers rides down in front of Little Round Top and finds Vincent's brigade in the woods just north of Little Round Top, because General Meade had ordered them from Rock Creek to that position.
And
I'm just teasing. Go ahead.
and that's part of James Barnes's division.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? I think some accounts have them as the lead brigade, but I believe that they're the rear brigade of the division.
Yeah, they had
when they're going in.
Tilton and Schweitzer were first. They're going to be
and Barnes
sent
went
into
out
Wheatfield.
with Tilton and Schweitzer.
Yeah.
So
and that's why
Vincent,
the courier couldn't find Barnes?
That's right.
Okay, so Vincent takes the initiative.
Well, we should tell you this, too, because I think a lot of – and just as an aside, a small point, but it's not just one messenger. So Meade – how's this? Meade sent a messenger to General Sykes, and Sykes sent a messenger to find General Barnes. These are a bunch of different messengers.
Right.
You know, so it's not the same messenger riding back and forth. These are the one guy delivers the message from Warren to Meade, and Meade to Sykes, and they're different messengers.
Okay.
And for our Brooklyn listeners, up here with Warren was
Washington Roebling.
Oh, there you go, the Brooklyn
Washington
Bridge.
A. Roebling.
who
Built the Brooklyn Bridge later.
Yeah.
Now, I guess Warren married Roebling's sister.
That's
Yes.
correct. Yeah.
And so he was living in Brooklyn, Warren, after the war.
That same monument's in Prospect Park.
the very
yeah?
same one as what we have here. I
Yeah,
didn't
pretty
realize
much
that.
the same monument. Yeah, you
Wow.
can
Do
make
people
two
climb
out
on
of
that
gold.
one too?
Huh?
Do
But
people
any-
climb on that one too?
I doubt.
You know what's interesting about it for General Warren, who discovered that the Southern Army was much farther to the south than the Northern Army had anticipated, and sent for reinforcements to come here. He's termed the savior of Little Round Top, and for the most part, I don't find anybody questioning General Warren. I mean, everybody
absolutely not. No.
Everybody thinks that's one of the great moments of the battle.
Sure.
And what he discovers is that the Confederates are beyond Devil's Den. They have a straight, unopposed line
To get
for
to
Little
the
Round
south,
Top. That's what appalling.
So okay. So then they come up. Vincent's coming up here to take to hold Little Round Top. So I guess timeline wise, should we start with Little Round Top first, or Devil's Den first, or what? What's happening first? Let's just go with Little Round Top because everybody loves that, and then we'll get that out of the way.
With the caveat that the fighting actually, Jim, tell me if I'm wrong, actually begins at Devil's Den.
Yeah.
And just a few minutes later.
That's all right.
That's
all right.
But since
But
it's an
it's
excellent
No offense, Tim.
I just think that it's easier when you're writing a book to do Little Round Top first,
Yes.
and then Devil's Den, and then the Wheat Field, and
Yeah,
the Peach
right.
Orchard. So chronology's out the window at that point.
Okay. All right. So just be aware of that, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. So Little Round Top. Who wants to take Little Round Top?
The rebels.
The rebels.
That's a good one.
Dispense with that. We
You
can
want
move
first
on.
Little Round Top?
So 15th Alabama is part of Law's brigade.
They're the extreme right.
They're the extreme
of the
right.
Confederate line.
They get into some skirmishing down by the Slider Farm, right, and go up top of Big Round Top.
Yeah, they actually go over.
Yeah.
Right over the summit.
They kind of fight their way up a little bit,
Right.
and then they get up to the top and they take a little break. Tell a story about what did they go through that day? Start with
Well, they were waking about 2 o'clock in the morning, about 27 miles from here. So basically, on the 2nd of July, in the heat and humidity, they're going to do a marathon to get here. And then they were up on Warfield Ridge here, and they're getting ready to make the attack, and they send about, 22 guys with canteens down to the, I used to live down there, and I can't think of the name of the farm down there.
Kern Farm?
Kern Farm, Alexander Kern Farm. Thank you, Charlie. There's a well there to fill up the canteens, bring it back so everybody can get a nice cold drink before they go into this attack. And the orders come to make the attack before the guys even get back with the water. And then those guys come out of the trees, the guys that were getting the water, where their colleagues were. There's nobody there. They go down the hill into the woods. They end up getting captured. So you've made this long, basically a marathon, and you're going to this attack, you don't even get water. And it's going to be an extraneous attack through rocky, wooded hillside, over creeks, very tough terrain, just to get your objective.
Sure. And then, so they're taking a break a little bit at the top there, right? Or what's the deal
story
with that?
I remember is Colonel Oates, the 15th Alabama, gets up there and sends a message back to his brigade commander, Vander Law. So this is Gibraltar. We could hold it indefinitely. And the word comes back, so, well, if you were to hold it, you have to cut down the trees for us to get the artillery up there to use it. And your orders are to attack anyhow, so please just go ahead and make your attack.
Okay. Yeah. It's Law. Is Hood out of action yet?
He's out.
Yep.
He's out
he goes
already.
down 15, 20 minutes after the attack
Okay,
starts.
so Law's now the division commander.
Yeah.
Okay.
It takes them a while to figure that out.
Takes Law a while.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have to find him.
What is it, Sheffield that takes over for him?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's good, man.
So, yeah, I don't know why I remember that.
I don't either.
So let's get to the 20th Maine out of the way.
That's what they were trying to do.
Yeah, they were trying to get him out. You're right.
Jeez, Bob, with all the puns tonight, this is great. So go ahead, 20th Maine.
Well, what's interesting about them is they're part of a brigade that's commanded by 26-year-old Colonel Strong Vincent, and they're moving up the Wheatfield Road basically toward the Peach Orchard to reinforce Sickles. And Colonel Vincent intercepts a message from Warren. It's for anybody that has the authority to make a decision, and demands that the Corps give him the message, and he reads it and basically says, "This hill's over your shoulder here is about to be attacked. We don't have anybody up there." So everybody sees the movie, and we have so many people that come here that love Chamberlain, but I try to make people realize if it weren't for his brigade commander Vincent, who made the decision to come up here, Chamberlain's not up here at all.
Right.
But if it's not for this guy over our shoulder here, General Warren, who found the hill occupied, understand the value, and sent the message down, Vincent's not up here. But the thing about Vincent, to me, he's a real hero. Chamberlain survives.
And wait, I'll do you one better. If it wasn't for Meade sending Warren up here, they wouldn't have been here. So it goes right back to your boy Meade.
Very good.
There you go.
But
Sorry.
Warren gets wounded in the neck. Chamberlain survives. Vincent gives his life. On the other side of the hill. So to me, he's a huge hero.
Yeah, sure. And
imagine the situation that he's in down here. You're 26 years old. You get the message. You've been ordered somewhere else. This guy's telling you, this West Pointer's telling you, you need to come up here. You're technically risking court-martial by coming up here.
Right, because the order wasn't specifically Vincent, get up there. Yeah. The order was send somebody up there.
Yeah, it's coming from a topographical engineer.
Yeah, he's right. He's breaking the chain of command, right? Mm-hmm. So he's taking the initiative. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the fight with Little Round Top. Let's give us the real scoop on this and not the movie version, please. Can we just settle this once and for all?
Well, I think one of the things that people don't realize when they come up here is that the initial fight on Little Round Top is not facing west. It's facing south toward Big Round Top, because the Confederates are coming. The first Confederates are coming from the direction of Big Round Top, and then, as we talked about before, Charlie's talking about in echelon. Then you have the Confederates coming down, overrunning Devil's Den, and attacking the west side of the hill here. So Warren's job's not done yet. Now he's got to go down the road, find additional reinforcements to extend Vincent's line. Vincent's line faces south. 16th Michigan Sharpshooters Monument down here basically is his right. So this side of the hill facing west is unoccupied. Now all of a sudden this is getting threatened. So Warren has to find another brigade, and he finds another West Pointer, Patrick O'Rourke, down here. And Patty O'Rourke, is willing to come up immediately, just like Vincent, gets killed on the western side of the hill. But then these other regiments of General Weed's brigade that Patrick O'Rourke is the lead regiment of are following, and they're extending the Union line around the west side of the hill to where we are right here, 155th Pennsylvania. So this hill now is defended from the southeast, where the 20th Maine is, around the south side, that's Vincent's brigade, and then Weed's brigade continues over here to the west to where we are right now, the 155th Pennsylvania, which, of course, is mostly responsible for winning the battle.
So
I have my great-great-uncles in that unit. Can't let that go.
So, okay. But, Tim, do you want to take on the 20th Maine, please?
Not really. I mean,
I'm not take them on, but you know what I mean. Give us the truth.
It's not that the 20th Maine and what they did isn't dramatic or anything like that. It's just that we always feel like we're dissing the other 499 regiments and batteries, and by talking about the one unit so much.
Yeah. Right.
It's not. It's just context. It's a matter of context. As part of Vincent's brigade, they held the hill pretty well, but I don't find their actual story more dramatic than any of the other units. So I mean, and having said that, I read The Killer Angels when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And so it's just I just think that a lot of people just have trouble putting it into context. I have trouble talking about it without getting out of control.
Well, that's what I'm
so I don't have to do that.
So can I just bounce something off of you guys in terms of putting things in context? Sorry, I can't even say that word.
That's an easier one.
Yes, I know.
It's the C words.
You want to stick to monosyllabic words.
Yeah.
That the book Killer Angels, the movie Gettysburg does not do is what is going on in the mind of William Calvin Oates, the commander of the 15th Alabama. Right. He's got his own problems, right?
What are those problems?
You guys want to address that?
Well, I think one of the problems in the whole Confederate attack on July 2nd that we've alluded to is that Hood is the division commander and Hood is wounded.
Right.
And then Law goes to take command of the division but exercises no order to anyone in the division until nightfall, so no one commands the division. And then Law has left his brigade to take division command. No one is commanding Law's brigade when he leaves. Sheffield is only in charge of his regiment and doesn't issue orders to the rest of the brigade. And then Robertson, the Texas brigade commander, part of his men are Devil's End, part of his men are Little Round Top. He doesn't exercise any kind of command over his brigade at all either. And each colonel is left on their own to make their own decisions. So when William C. Oates and the 15th Alabama arrive at the base of Little Round Top and there's troops up on the hill in front of them and are trying to take that hill, he can coordinate with the regiment beside him, but that's it. There's no orders, or it's up to him to do,
so
whatever he can himself with his unit. And it's like that for all the regiment commanders along the line. So to broaden the point, each of them has their own problems. And of course, he has to charge up the hill and try to push these troops out of the rocks in front of him.
Does he not have a unique problem from all the others in that he is the right end of the Confederate line, and there's a road over there on the other side of this hill?
The Taneytown Road with the Union supply line on it or whatever. I don't know if that ever comes into play because it's so far away from the road. But, he's the right flank. And I guess you're cautious when you're on the right flank and you throw skirmishers out to your right. But I don't know, unless you talk at the very end where the sharpshooters appear. I don't know if
there's that. Which was just one company, Company B, and a few sharpshooters.
So I guess I'm going to ask you specifically then, with the 20th Maine, was it as neat and textbook as as people popularly remember it, or was it more of kind of a coincidence that Chamberlain's men were going down the hill while Oates was about to withdraw?
Well, I think what your point is there's a lot of conflicting information about the charge.
Yes.
And Chamberlain writes a lot about it afterwards. And James Rice writes about it in December of 1863 in the New York Times, and he dies in 1864.
And Rice is the brigade commander when Vincent
Rice
goes down.
takes command of the brigade when Vincent goes down, and then Rice dies at the Battle of Spotsylvania, I believe, on Laurel Hill. But he writes a letter about it, and his letter is just not very accurate. So, there's all kinds of things
not very accurate
that comes from Chamberlain, that comes from Rice.
Right.
And they're in a battle of words after the battle with the Pennsylvania Reserves and Crawford. And so they're not very factually correct in their statements. For instance, let me just give for instance. Rice and Chamberlain write that they capture 500 Confederate soldiers on the slopes of Little Round Top. If you add up every single lost Confederate from all the units that participated in the fighting at Little Round Top and Devil's Den, it's like 175.
Yeah, right.
So how's it 500? And then, of course, the Confederates leave behind their muskets, and they capture like 1,000 muskets or something. I don't know. But there's all these things in it that or hyperbole afterwards. I think, just look at it like this. The Union Army was very proud of holding Little Round Top, and the commanders up there, the ones that wrote about it, wrote in glowing terms their own men, and we don't fault them for anything like that. But it's just tough when you're going back and you're trying to put some things in context, like our unit made it to here, or, we did this, I ordered a charge.
Yeah. Okay. So
and then I know Chamberlain supporters will argue that who was it? William Randolph Hearst, is it? Yeah. Changed his words in one of his later articles that he wrote, Through Blood and Fire, and they're not really Chamberlain's words. But I don't know.
Chamberlain was a good writer, though.
Chamberlain wrote a letter to I think it's the governor of Maine a couple weeks after the battle. And someone named Smith leaked the letter to all the Maine newspapers. And it was a glowing tribute of Chamberlain, of what Chamberlain did. But he didn't want anybody to know about it. It was a private letter to the governor, but it accidentally got leaked to all the papers.
Of course.
So, Chamberlain was a very good promoter of himself.
Okay.
And his story.
Yeah, right. Okay. Right. Okay.
And that's the only thing.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Aren't you a little more harsh on Chamberlain
I
usually?
am.
Yeah. So what do you hold back
here's
for?
what you guys. I think one thing you guys don't understand about me on my tours. I don't talk about the 20th Maine. That's how I handle it.
What if somebody asked you to take them there?
I don't take people to the 20th Maine Monument. Why would I do that?
If you want to tour with Tim Smith, send an email to
If you want
Matt.
to do the battle, sometimes I give special tours a little round top.
Right.
But on a regular battlefield tour, I'm not going to the 20th Maine Monument. They can visit it after the tour.
Wow.
Don't talk about him. Don't bring him up. Don't talk, it's out of context. To explain his story is just getting it out of context.
Okay.
He should not be discussed when we talk about the battle. That's what should be happening.
Wow. Okay.
I don't necessarily agree, but we should move on.
Let's talk about the other 499 colonels.
Yeah, what you're saying.
You just understand. It's just by talking about where it's out of context.
I get what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
I know.
I'm going along with you. All right, so let's move up the line then a little bit here because we have running out of time.
Think outside the bus and let Getty's Bike Tours show you the only way to truly experience Gettysburg. There's a reason why Getty's Bike Tours is the longest running bicycle tour company in Gettysburg, and that's because they put the customer's experience at the top of their list of priorities. Follow a licensed battlefield guide through some of the most legendary ground in American history. There's a tour route for everyone, from the newbie to the hardcore history buff. So go to gettysbike.com or call 717-752-7752 and book your reservation today. Mention Addressing Gettysburg and receive 10% off your tour. That's gettysbike.com or 717-752-7752. Discount does not apply to rentals.
Do you have a local business in Gettysburg? Do you want to reach people who are itching to visit us, but don't know exactly where to stay, where to eat, or what to do while they're here? Well, then you should consider advertising on Addressing Gettysburg. You can reach thousands of Gettysburg enthusiasts per month who are within a 4 to 8 hour drive of us, as well as all over the world. Reach them where they are before they're already in town. This is the more affordable and more 21st century way to advertise. So contact us at advertise@addressinggettysburg.com for more information. That's advertise@addressinggettysburg.com. Let's get to the wheat field and the wheat field action. So who are the Confederate troops that are going to go into the wheat field? Who are the Union troops that are going to try to push them out? And what the hell happens in the wheat field?
Well, if you set up Sickles' line, Ward's in Devil's Den, de Trobriand's in the wheat field, and you got Graham is at the Peach Orchard. That's Birney's division. And then there's artillery, Smith's Battery, Devil's Den, and I never can remember him who's in the wheat field. Winslow in the wheat field, and then the other artillery's up in the Peach Orchard. Okay, so when the attack starts in echelon, and we have the attack Little Round Top, Devil's Den, troops are moved from the wheat field to come down here and help out from de Trobriand. Troops will move from Burling, who's in reserve behind the Emmetsburg Road there, and he's part of Humphrey's division. They're going to move them into the wheat field.
So New Jersey guys, right?
New Jersey and the 115th Pennsylvania, I believe, will move in to the wheat field. Okay, they're going to be firing obliquely into the woods, and they're going to strike the 3rd Alabama or the 3rd Arkansas on the flank. Okay, because in echelon, there's nobody on your left.
Right.
And so the left's in the air. So they eventually Tig Anderson's brigade of Georgians will come up, and that essentially starts the fight in the wheat field.
When Anderson
comes up, that's the fight for
Anderson's in the second line.
He's in the second line.
Right.
He's supposed to support Robertson, and he comes over to cover the flank.
To his left.
Yeah, to the left of the 3rd Arkansas.
Okay.
And he strikes the 17th Maine along the stone wall and others. So he's going to, and this is a simplified version.
Yeah.
You do 2 minutes or you do 2 days.
2 minutes is good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he's going to be repulsed. Okay. So then you got more. You got other troops being added into the attack, and basically Kershaw will come up, and Kershaw is coming across the field, just south of the Peach Orchard.
Okay.
And Schweitzer and Tilton, who are on the right of the 17th Maine on what we call Stony Hill, think they're going to be flanked. They're going to pull out. When they pull out, they expose the flank of the New Jersey troops, 6th New Jersey. They're going to pull out. Okay, and so they're going to seize Stony Hill. So this is the second Confederate attack. All right.
Right.
Then what you have, simply put, is Caldwell's division is going to be ordered from the Pennsylvania Monument to come in and support the fight.
These are Second Corps now.
This is Second Corps.
Right.
Yeah. This is a bowl of chili. Okay, it's in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, everything's in there, and they're going to come up and they're going to push the Confederates back out of Stony Hill.
Okay.
Okay, so they're going to stop there, and Semmes comes up.
So basically, what's going to happen is a back and forth, ebb and flow.
Yeah. But the key to this is when Wofford advances. Now, I'm going to get into the peach orchard here a minute, if that's okay.
Sure.
Because Barksdale will clear the peach orchard, and Barksdale comes blowing through the peach orchard around about 6 o'clock or so, maybe a little later, and he is going to wheel and attack northward as Lee wanted him to, up the Emmitsburg Road.
Right.
But he blows a hole in the peach orchard. Into it comes Wofford. And when Wofford comes in, there's very little in front of him except artillery facing the wrong way. So they're going to have to pull out, and Wofford comes right down the Wheatfield Road and comes into the rear of the troops that are holding the Wheatfield, Union troops holding the Wheatfield.
Okay.
So they got to scramble to get out of there, and some make it and some do not. Okay, and Wofford will collect Semmes, Anderson, okay, elements of Robertson, and maybe even some of Benning.
And you miss Kershaw.
And I miss Kershaw. See, there's so many, they all look alike after a while. And they're all going to come rolling down across this plain right here in front of us, here at the base of Little Round Top. And the whole Union line's collapsing now.
Okay.
Because the Devil's Den has fallen.
Devil's Den has
already.
fallen, and the Confederates, to me, okay, and this will make Tim happy, the biggest threat to this hill is not the southern end. Not the end that people talk about. Greatest threat to this hill is right out here in front of me, north of the hill. Wofford and all those other guys coming in, because there's very little in front of them. Meade will move Crawford across. And Crawford's Pennsylvania reserves are down here north of the hill, and they see him coming. There's a Gibbs battery up here. That's not on the hill. It's down on the little hill north of this. And they're going to be firing into this mass of Confederates. I should also point out that Burbank and Day are in there. These are U.S. regulars. They get thrown in near the end of the fighting in the Wheatfield. So you have a mass of Union troops running off the field, or relocating, as we say, and the Confederates pushing them in. This is Crawford's big time.
Yeah. And I always, a lot of people diss the Pennsylvania Reserves, and, I'm always one to defend, I'm sure you defend the Pennsylvania Reserves, Pennsylvanians. But, think about the dramatic moment that happens here. All these Union troops are fleeing the Wheatfield and fleeing the field. And have you heard that one of the Confederate reporters writes that Longstreet enters the fray at this point and grabs one of Wofford's regimental flags, and Longstreet is leading the attack up the Wheatfield Road? They overrun Walcott's battery. We know that. So they get down to the Wakert Farm Lane, and they're sweeping towards Little Round Top. And all of a sudden, they look up on top of the ridge, and there's a division of the Pennsylvania Reserve stepping out of the woods and marching towards them. Yep. And you know what happens? They turn and they leave the field. Yeah. And people will point out, the Pennsylvania Reserves don't have any casualties on July 2nd. How can you say that, they don't do anything? That's my argument, right? The no casualties.
No casualties, no fights.
So, but the arrival of the Pennsylvania Reserves and their steady march down the slopes of Little Round Top and northern, we call that northern Little Round Top, right? That area over there. That just ends the Confederate attack on July 2nd.
Is that Munchausen's Hill?
We should mention that that's a name that Eric Campbell coined when he was doing a resource study for the clearing of that rise of ground near the Sedgwick Monument.
Right.
A guy named John Munchauer.
Ranger? He was a ranger, Eric Campbell?
Yep. Eric Campbell, the Ranger.
Munchauer?
Munchauer.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's
like a shower.
Yeah. Munchauer.
Munchauer. Okay.
Yeah. John Munchauer. He owns that land there, and that's why we call it that. Yes.
Okay. So I have a couple of questions from some listeners. Somebody, I think he's from Kansas, and he wants to know if any of the units that were in the U.S. regulars, I guess companies or whatever, were any of them shipped up here from Kansas? Or these? I didn't really understand his question exactly, but I said I think I get it.
Well, I think what he's talking about is the U.S. regulars had forts in Iowa and Kansas,
Right.
and the men are recruited out of those forts, and some of them are U.S. regulars that were stationed in those forts. And so I get to sometimes people say, "Oh, there are Iowa troops and Kansas troops in these units."
Right.
Well, kind of.
Yeah,
because the U.S. regulars is a little bit different than say a Pennsylvania regiment. They're
You're
not all
joining the
from
United States regular
right.
army.
Yeah.
So you're not all from the same area.
Right.
Okay. Another one that I thought was interesting is from a guy named Serge, and he remembers hearing about the fighting around the Rose Farm being so heavy that a lot of the men wrote about hearing the dinner bell being hit by bullets on the porch.
There's an account of the 110th Pennsylvania that mentions that, hearing the bullets hitting the dinner bell. There's a little what do they call that?
Dinner
a
bell?
kitchen. No, there's a kitchen.
Summer
kitchen. And there's a bell above it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, one of my favorite accounts, I'm sure everybody has their favorite account of the second day, is Kershaw, who's riding alongside the Rose Barn, and he hears this weird sound, like the rattling of, hailstones.
Yeah.
And then he hears it again, and he realizes it's canister hitting the barn beside him, the barn wall.
Yeah.
Well, now, so what he wants to know about this bell is the bell still there? What happened to the bell?
No.
Do we know where the bell is?
No.
No, nobody knows where the bell is. Okay. Sorry, Serge.
No.
You can't go see the bell.
It isn't in the count, though. I'm pretty sure 110th PA.
I think it
Matt?
is.
Yeah.
I'm just going to tie up a couple loose ends.
Go ahead.
The charge of the Pennsylvania Reserves is also going to put an end to the wheat field back and forth, right? Because where do the Confederates who were threatening the north side of Little Round Top, where do they end up?
They pull back towards the other side of the wheat field in Peach Orchard.
Stony Hill, Peach Orchard.
And the Pennsylvania Reserve stop at the stone wall out the end of the wheat field. And then at night, and then all into the next morning, the wheat field's a no man's land.
Right.
Well, you know what I should mention since you're on Pennsylvania Reserves? So one of the things that's important for all the listeners to probably know is that after the battle, Samuel Wiley Crawford is very proud of the Pennsylvania Reserves, and there's a lot of writing about the Pennsylvania Reserves at Little Round Top. And in one of the writings, they say the Pennsylvania Reserves made the last charge of the day. And this infuriates Colonel James Rice, who thinks that Crawford is referring to Fisher's brigade that arrived on the area of the 20th Maine, and they're in a battle for years between Vincent and Pennsylvania Reserve, just because of a misunderstanding of the context of what Crawford was talking about.
Fisher's brigade wasn't in the charge. Just
there was one regiment.
One
right?
regiment.
Yeah,
it was in the charge.
So Fisher's men went over and then went up the big round top behind the 20th Maine and Vincent.
But I think you need to know that this charge of the Pennsylvania Reserves is one of the most romanticized episodes of the battle.
What's that big quote? Oh, no, that's the regulars I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Well, in some respects, it's because Pennsylvanians are on Pennsylvania soil.
Sure.
Right,
Company K, the first Pennsylvania Reserves that's in this charge, Company K is from Gettysburg.
Gettysburg, yeah.
And, men are charging across land that they grew up on.
Right.
Land that their relatives own.
Yeah. Okay, so we still have to get to what happens at Culp's Hill. So let's fast forward it here. So Mclaws, he's done. Now the next in line is AP Hill's Corps.
Right.
And then it seems to kind of sort of tinker out at that point. What happens? So, some of Hill's men go forward, correct?
Sure.
Yeah. And then what happens to them? Okay.
When Barksdale starts moving up the Emmitsburg Road, then you start seeing Anderson's division starts moving forward. In echelon, Wilcox, then Prairie, the Floridians, and then up to Wright's Georgians. And then you start moving a little further north. By this time, it's dark. It's getting dark.
Okay.
And the town is a problem because you can't see around it. It's very difficult to communicate through it. And so you get to where Rhodes is supposed to join the attack and hit Cemetery Hill from one side while Early's hitting it from the other. And he, in his report, said, I didn't advance because it was too dark. So that's that basic. And Gordon says pretty much the same thing. He's supposed to go for it. He doesn't either. These are two of your best combat officers in the Confederate Army. And they basically said it was too dark. We couldn't see. We didn't advance. So the attack starts to fizzle at that point.
And then so what's going on then over on the Union right?
Well,
at this
can we
point?
hang on a minute?
Sure.
I can't imagine doing a July 2nd without mentioning the 1st Minnesota. So, Jim, can you talk about their contribution?
Well, Sickles falls back to Cemetery Ridge where he originated, where he's supposed to be. And he's completely disordered. He's lost 42% of the 10,000-man corps. The Confederates are pursuing them, threatening to break the Union line right and center here in Cemetery Ridge. So they call for support from Culp's Hill. Guys who've entrenched over there are now being called away just as being attacked, taking advantage of the interior lines coming from Culp's Hill. What, about a mile, Charlie?
Yeah.
And they're able to ride up and stabilize Sickles' line. But they needed time, reinforcements from Culp's Hill on the right to get there. And General Hancock, who would have been immediately on Sickles' right from the Pennsylvania Memorial up to Cemetery Hill, rides up to a unit of soldiers that's there from Minnesota, the only Minnesota regiment we have here, the 1st Minnesota. And he asked the commanding officer, what regiment is this? It was William Colville. He said, 1st Minnesota, sir. And Hancock points into the thicket here that runs parallel to the Emmitsburg Road Ridge down below it. And Alabamans are streaming off the hillside, and the Minnesotans are outnumbered about 3-1. I want you to attack them. So it's doing the same thing that we talked about last night with the 16th Maine. You're basically sacrificing these guys to blunt the Confederate attack, buy time for reinforcements to ride and stabilize Sickles' line. It worked. But they end up with the highest percentage of casualties of any regiment here at Gettysburg. It was the whole war?
The whole war.
82%.
No.
Not the whole war. Tim, you always take my
1st
stories
Minnesota
away.
propaganda. Okay, no. See, here, I just let me preface this by
It
saying
says it on the monument.
Let me-
In the annals of warfare,
Okay.
this attack was unparalleled
they're
for
not
valor.
even in the top 10
valor.
at the Battle of Gettysburg. They don't even break the top 10. I think they're number 11. Okay, so you know what's happening with that? The next day, that evening, more men returned to the regiment.
Right.
And so they buffered their strength, and on July 3rd, they have more men. Now, you might say, well, no, we're just talking about the charge. Yeah. Well, then how about if, the 154th New York on the first day of the battle, they had men that arrived on July 2nd.
Yes.
We don't qualify their loss.
Right.
We have the whole unit during the battle. I think they lose 69% during the battle. 83 in the charge.
Okay.
But they don't have some of their men with them, and there's men returned
So
later.
you're saying like 8 companies were involved in the charge, but there's more coming tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you start playing around with numbers like that, we can do it with other units and then put the other units
But
above
Tim,
them.
Right.
it says it on the monument.
Well, but he says it's Minnesota propaganda.
And then they're going to have
Highest
additional
percentage in the
casualties
shortest amount of
next day
time
against
per
They
British.
have the additional casualties. But on the whole
I think
battle, it's
that's
like
right. I heard.
69. But let's say they lose 83%. Well, I think the 23rd North Carolina has a higher percentage loss. The 8th Virginia lost 90% of their men in Pickett's charge. They're definitely a lot higher. The second main heavy artillery at Petersburg, when they went in as infantry, they lost more men. It's the. They're also, 1st Minnesota say that the 1st Civil War Regiment. You ever hear that?
Yeah.
And that's not even, that's a real big stretch, too.
Right.
Okay, another episode. Tim is the
And
guest.
picking on-
Tim
Just
debunks.
blasting, and I'll
No,
put all my favorite stories
I
out there,
love-
and he'll tear them apart.
I love
That's
the-
another episode.
I love
Let's
the
keep moving.
sacrifice of the 1st Minnesota, but it's not the highest percentage loss. Or
What did Hancock say about the charge of the 1st Minnesota?
What did he say?
All time, isn't it? Is the millennia of their glory.
Oh, that's Edward Everett. That's Edward Everett said that, right? That's on the monument. That's on the
monument.
I think Hancock
but didn't
said.
Hancock say it?
I think he said.
No,
"The
that's
hell did I
Edward
do
Everett's
that for?"
speech.
Yeah, it's in the speech.
All time is the millennium of their glory.
But is Everett quoting Hancock?
Oh, I don't know.
He
But
might have got it
that's from
from
Edward. What I understood is on one side of the Minnesota Monument is a quote from Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
These men shall not have died in vain. And the other side's a quote from Edward Everett's speech. I don't know what Edward Everett's quoting, though. I could be wrong.
I thought that was
We don't do cemetery tours. That's cool. That's awesome.
No, but that millennium, that does come from his
Edward Everett's speech.
Yeah.
I don't know now. We'll look this up.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, we're
Don't you
also.
think it's great when we fight?
I love it. I love it. Oh, I love it. We're going to call that episode
no.
Tim Smith Turns Your World Upside Down.
Let me just tell you one
'Cause
thing that's interesting to me about the 1st Minnesota, and I do actually really like the 1st Minnesota. I'm just, besides saying that they didn't have the highest loss. When I was a kid, there was this thing called the electric map.
Oh, boy.
Oh, yes. It's in Hanover.
Peggy.
Do you
Peggy's
remember
associated with that now.
The 1st Minnesota is the only regiment mentioned by name
Yeah,
in the
I remember
electric
that,
map.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, well,
And the
yeah,
light
right.
would blink.
Yeah.
The light
The
would
little
blink.
white light, I think it was, would
Yeah.
blink where it
So
was.
here's is this kind of radical to say? The 1st Minnesota was the 20th Maine of my day.
Okay.
You could say
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, before they
yeah.
became big with the movie and everything.
So in 10 years or 20 years from now, what regiment that we don't think about today is going to be like the big regiment?
Depends on if I get to make my miniseries or not.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm sorry, Jim. I just got off on a tangent.
Okay. So,
never do that.
So let's get over now to the Union right then. Culp's Hill, East Cemetery Hill. When all this is dying down. Now, so you say Rhodes doesn't go.
Rhodes doesn't go.
Gordon doesn't go.
Gordon doesn't go.
Does the rest
Billy
of Early's
Mahone
division
doesn't
go?
Yeah.
Does the rest of Early's division go? How does
Early goes?
Yeah, Early goes.
Early goes with Hayes
Right.
and Avery.
Okay.
Extra Billy Smith is at ladies' lingerie at Walmart. He's out there watching the Baltimore Pike.
Right.
Or the York Pike.
Okay. And quickly, why?
Why?
is he out
Because
there?
there's no cavalry
Right. Okay.
at that point. So
That was
he's
quick.
detached.
All right. So
Along the Sheila Road, I think, out in that area.
So now, does the East Cemetery Hill fight start before Culp's Hill?
No, after.
After. So it starts on the far right and then works its way
Correct.
back to East Cemetery Hill.
Right.
And is Rhodes supposed to join with that, or is he supposed to join with Hill? Like, is it supposed to roll up and
He was supposed to follow the regiments on his right when they went in.
Okay, so that would be Hill.
And they don't go.
Okay.
The attack breaks down before it gets to
And that would
All
be
right.
Pender's division.
Pender's division, exactly.
So
Yeah.
what starts it with on Culp's Hill on the
Well,
right?
we have to go back to
ahead.
to Ewell's orders.
Good.
Make a demonstration to be converted into a real attack should the opportunity present itself. And so the skirmishers are in contact with one another, and basically Meade will order the entire 12th Corps off of Culp's Hill to come across here as this line's collapsing. He believes this is where the action is focused, and so you have Williams' division, the 12th Corps will leave. Williams, acting corps commander, will order Geary to stay behind, occupy the trenches that they had worked on all morning. In the meantime, orders come for Geary to follow. Williams is already gone, and Geary comes off the hill. At this point, the Confederates know they're leaving. Is this an opportunity? And this is what triggers the advance of Johnson's division, minus the Stonewall Brigade, which is doing what Extra Billy Smith's doing, watching cavalry, David McMurtry Gregg's cavalry. If you want to get into it, I would contend with anyone, David McMurtry Gregg did more to win this battle as a cavalry officer than any other cavalry officer in the Union Army, including Buford. Okay, so we won't get into that right now.
Okay, that's another thing for Tim to argue.
They're watching the cavalry, and here's Ewell. He's supposed to attack, and he's got the enemy in front of him and behind him. No wonder he's walking around chirping like a bird.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
But he does what he's told.
Okay.
And they attack the hill, and only Greene's brigade is left behind. Greene was getting ready to follow when the Confederate attack began.
Right.
And so he's permitted to stay on the hill. He's supposed to occupy the whole hill.
Mm-hmm.
And Vincent's on this hill, Little Round Top. Greene's on Culp's Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Vincent has what? 5 regiments attacking him. Okay? Greene has 3 brigades, 15 regiments attacking him.
Yeah.
Okay? So where do you think the Confederates have a better chance for victory?
Culp's Hill.
Culp's Hill.
Yeah. Numerically, at least.
At least numerically.
Yeah.
All right? And so Greene will extend his line down. And I notice you have on here the 137th
Yeah.
New York. I saw the movie, not as much as Tim. Tim's addicted to it.
Okay.
Okay, but I know that the 20th Maine is the end of the line.
Right.
Vincent told him twice, this is the end of the line. The line ends here.
Right.
Okay? So there must be a beginning to the line somewhere, and that's the 137th New York. They're the beginning of the line. What you have are the 2 end regiments.
Right.
137th New York will be the right flank of the Union Army. 20th Maine's the left flank on July 2nd at this point. Okay? That won't be true later on. But if you look at it, they're going to be flanked as the 20th Maine was. They're going to be flanked twice. They're going to be driven back. They're going to make a bayonet charge. Not quite as successful as the 20th Maine because they're attacking probably 3 times the troops that the 20th Maine is dealing with. Okay? So when we're talking about the 20th Maine, well, let's have a little love for the 137th New York.
Yeah, sure.
David Ireland, their commander, does not survive the war. He dies in Atlanta in 1864, so he's not there to write the accolades of the 137th New York, which suffered higher casualties in the Civil War than the 20th Maine. So let's take a look at casualties.
Okay.
Damage done. Percentage of loss to me is the key. Okay? 32.4% for the 20th Maine, 32.4% for the 137th New York.
Really?
Same percentage of loss. If you look at the numbers, what's the 20th Maine lose? 128, 129, I think somewhere in that range. 137th New York loses 137. They lost more men.
To be clear, these are casualties, not dead. These are
casualties,
dead,
right?
Wounded, missing.
These are people unfit to continue the fight.
Right. Okay.
They could be somebody ran off to 2 taverns or something.
Right.
Okay, they're casualties.
Yeah,
they're
that's
not
what I
there
would
the
have
next
done.
day, right?
Yeah.
So these are casualties.
Okay.
So these are your 2 man regiments, and both of them were able to hold the hill. And it's not Greater Culp's Hill and Lesser Culp's Hill, is it, Tim? It's Culp's Hill and
That's right, we learned
Spangler's
that.
Hill.
Spangler's
we learned
Hill.
that,
Yeah, we
yeah.
talked about
Yes,
that
we've
before.
learned that. we've been
argued
educated.
about that.
Yeah.
So that's what's going on in Culp's Hill.
Okay.
And basically what you had is the Confederates will seize Spangler's Hill and are very close to the Baltimore Pike when the battle ends on July the 2nd.
For those of you in the audience who don't know what that reference was to, on an earlier show, Tim, you were saying that you prefer to call it Spangler's Hill, but other people call it Lower Culp's Hill, right?
Yeah.
So that would be where the
They have,
Second
to, they have
Maryland.
to go back and listen to that
Yeah,
episode.
just go find that one.
right.
I don't remember.
we had a very good
Yeah,
education.
Charlie, you were on that one too,
I was,
right? Yeah.
yes.
So that was the Culp's Hill Ask a Guide that we did.
Yes.
Okay, so the Green's Brigade's up there. They're fighting. Eventually, things calm down here enough for the 12th Corps to go back to Culp's Hill. What happens when they go back?
They get shot at. As they go back, it's dark now.
Yeah.
Very confused.
Yeah.
There was.
They go back the way they came in, though, right? Like the way they came
no,
up.
but what they fail to realize is that part of the line has been taken over by the Confederates.
Right. How do they discover this?
Well, they're moving towards their trench line. They run into Confederate skirmishers, probably not around Spangler Spring, is where they run into them there, and they send some troops out, capture a couple Confederates. They say, well, I think it's the 2nd Massachusetts.
Okay.
Send some men out, and they get in, and some of them don't come back because the Confederates now know they're there. Okay, so they're aware now. Confederates. My favorite story is when Kane comes back. Kane's a brigade commander in Geary's division. Green, Candy, Kane. Okay, these are the brigade commanders in in Geary's division. Green stayed. Kane will turn around and come back. He actually gets to the hill first of the 12th Corps returning. They're coming across Pardee Field to go across that field into their trench line, which is up in the woods there on Spangler's Hill and they're fired on because it's dark. They don't know. They believed that it was Green's men firing on them because they didn't know who they were. And so my favorite story, and it's probably not true because it's too good to be true, but anyway, they asked for someone to go out and announce who they were. And a lieutenant in 111th Pennsylvania decided, I'll go out. And he goes out in the middle of Pardee Field and yells, 3 cheers for Abraham Lincoln and the Union. And as they said, the woods fairly erupted in flame and smoke. And the man crawled back with more humility than when he left and humbly announced that the woods are full of secessionist Democrats, not a good Union man amongst them. And so they lost, I think they lost like 11 men to this volley.
Okay.
There. And so they now know the line has been compromised. So there's a lot of confusion that night of July 2nd into the morning of the 3rd as units are trying to find themselves.
So do they fight to take these back in the dark, or what happens?
No, they wait till the next day.
They wait till the next day. So they just kind of hunker down where they
are. In
are.
fact, one of Green's staff, I was thinking it was Charles Horton, will come and say, hey, you're on place, follow me. And he brings them up and puts them behind Green's brigade. So they're there that morning on the 3rd.
So then at this point, everything kind of calms down on Culp's Hill for the night?
Yeah, except if somebody sneezes, then they shoot at them.
But so just random shots.
They're within 40 yards of one another, basically.
Yes, so they're really close.
You can hear the other side talking.
Oh, jeez.
That's how close they are.
All right. And so let's then set the stage for tomorrow, July 3rd. Are we done?
Cemetery Hill.
Yeah.
Oh, Cemetery Hill. Yeah. Sorry.
So here's the way I like to tell it, so people understand. Okay. So what you have is they took men, okay, to save Little Round Top. They took men from Cemetery Ridge to save Little Round Top, and the Confederates attacked Cemetery Ridge. So they took men from Culp's Hill to save Cemetery Ridge, and the Confederates attacked Culp's Hill. So they take men from Cemetery Hill to save Culp's Hill, and the Confederates attack Cemetery Hill. Okay, so what you have is that the Confederates are attacking when they see, when there's opportunities.
We're sure.
Yeah, and of course, this is Hayes and Avery will attack Cemetery Hill. It's now dark. They get up on the hill. Hayes will get up. Avery gets up. There's an argument over who had more men on the hill. Depends on what part of the hill you're standing on. Hayes had more, I guess, would be the northern east part of the hill, and then Avery had more men, which would be east of that, further down the hill.
So like Menchie Springs, that area?
Yeah, a little north of that.
Okay.
A little beyond.
So
but
like
they
the
had
woods.
the Baltimore Pike in sight.
Oh, the football field. Is it the football field?
Yeah, they come across the football field.
Because he was hit by the concession stand.
Yeah, right by he failed to pay.
Getting a burger.
And they shot him.
Okay, so but now the fight for East Cemetery Hill.
Yes.
When you go there today, it's kind of hard to imagine it because you got the cemetery now. You've got these the National Cemetery. I mean, and you've got the all the buildings, the parking lot, woods, the school,
yes,
neighborhood.
Yes.
So it's kind of like the sunken road at Fredericksburg for Gettysburg.
It is.
Right? It's just right.
Good analogy. I like that.
It's just everything ruins it right in front of you, right on the other side of the stone wall. It's all gone. So, but it's a pretty hairy fight. The Confederates actually do get to the top of the hill.
Hand to hand. Club musket, fist. You have fence rails. Union soldiers are taking fence rails to use as weapons against the Confederates.
And this is in the dark.
It's in the dark.
So random flashes of light, like strobe lights almost.
Hayes will get on the hill, and he's expecting Rhodes to come from the other side.
Okay.
Troops come from the other side, and Hayes will hold his fire. He thinks it's Rhodes.
Right.
Okay. They will fire. He won't let them return. They fire again. Won't let them return fire. Third time he notices that the uniforms are different. So they took 3 volleys without return because it's at night.
Because these are Union reinforcements.
These are 11th Corps guys.
Yeah. Okay.
Coming up the drive.
So you're not talking about Carroll's brigade?
No,
not yet. Not yet. These guys,
Right. Okay.
Carroll comes up as these guys are actually pushing in.
Oh, you're saying in the beginning. So Avery, or not Avery, which was Avery or Hayes? You said
Hayes was
Hayes.
Yeah.
So Hayes gets up there, and he's assuming that the Union troops on the hill are Rhodes's men that had already taken it from the other side,
and they're coming to support. That's the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the plan.
Now that's the plan. So before I asked you if Rhodes in an echelon attack with Hill and Longstreet, if it was all supposed to go all the way around,
it was,
right?
Yes.
But it ended up not happening that way. Rhodes didn't go,
and nobody else did either.
At all ever.
Right.
But Hayes is expecting it to be just a continuation of what started down on the left when he sees those troops and thinks they're Rhodes.
Well, Hayes gets the orders from Early.
Yeah.
Who received orders from Ewell that Johnson's advancing. He was supposed to advance with Johnson.
Okay.
So he moves forward on Johnson's attack.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell the story about the Confederate who tries to capture the gun.
Well, then there's actually, it's on a monument. The Confederate runs up, I think it's in Weidrich's battery. They're Germans, a lot of them. And he runs up in front of the gun, and he's standing there on a hill. And supposedly he says, I claim this gun for the Confederacy. And the German gunner who had the gun primed and ready to fire, he says, if he wants it, you got it. And he pulls the cord and blows the guy away.
Jeez.
You don't stand in front of loaded guns.
No.
I think the German was Du sollst sie haben.
That's it. Yeah.
And you shall have it.
And you shall have it. If he wants it, you got it. Yeah. And so that's how desperate, that's how close the fighting was.
Yeah.
What's that monument? Is that Weidrich's monument that shows the men running with the fence rails?
Or is it the 73rd Pennsylvania?
73rd, that's what it is.
Right behind Weidrich's battery.
Yeah, right.
So
there
at what point does Hancock's men arrive?
They're coming up after the 11th Corps is engaging Hayes.
Okay.
Carroll has to come across the backside of the cemetery, and they're going to strike mostly Avery's men.
Okay.
and they're going to push them out of Ricketts Battery.
Okay, but they have a pretty significant role to play in this too.
Sure. I mean, yeah, they although all things considered, let's give the 11th Corps their due. They could probably clear the hill.
Krasnowski was pulled out of the cemetery area, and his brigade came across first, and they're the ones that went right into Weidrich's battery and right in front where the Ohioans had held. And so I think the 11th Corps takes umbrage to the fact that people say that Carroll bailed them out. They maintain that Carroll arrived and swept, but it was like ending when Carroll arrived.
Okay.
Yeah, the Confederates were already in recession.
So give the Flying Dutchman more credit and Hancock a little less.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, I liked when Charlie was talking about this, that the thing that, he was pushing and the thing that, it's hard not to see when you look at this is all evening long on July 2nd, the Confederates are attacking one area and pulling troops from another. And, finally, Hayes and Avery get up on the Cemetery Hill, and because Rhodes decides not to attack West Cemetery Hill, the Union Army is able to shift reinforcements and drive them back, and they would not have been able to shift those reinforcements
had Rhodes attacked.
attacked.
There you go.
Sometimes your attack is, according to, this would be General Ulysses S. Grant, the purpose of your attack is not to win the battle. It's to hold the troops in position in front of you. That was the whole thing about Laurel Hill, wasn't it?
Right, it was.
So can we go back just a little bit to why Rhodes doesn't attack, Pender didn't attack, and why did Pender not attack?
It's a good question. Probably because Pender's wounded?
He's wounded,
And the brigade commanders don't take the initiative to continue the attack up the line. And I think the attack really actually ends in Anderson's division.
With
the left flank of it.
Posey.
With Mahone and Posey.
Mahone,
Posey
Billy.
They didn't all go. They got hung up on the Bliss farm.
Posey goes past the Bliss farm, doesn't he?
But not much past, and not his whole brigade. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah.
I thought maybe he held a couple of regiments back.
Well, that could be, yeah.
So do you remember that our good friend and fellow guide who's passed away, Elwood Christ, maintained that the skirmish at the Bliss farm destroyed the Confederate plan of battle because the Essalon attack died with the skirmish.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't know how true it is, but I've read a quote. I think I've read it in Gelzo's book most recently. Lee saying after the war, had Dorsey Pender stayed on his horse another half hour, I would have won.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, sometimes wounding, like Hood's wounding, and
big guy now.
The division commander. And we talk a lot about corps commanders and people who rise to command, but the division commander in either army is a very important person in the battle.
And Hood's dynamic, and that's a key. He's a big player. He's like Michael Jordan. How many championships has the Bulls won without him?
Yeah.
So that's Hood. He's a significant player, and he's down 20 minutes after the battle starts.
So Matt, are you going to go to the question we had towards the end last night?
Yes.
This might be a good segue.
Who are the heroes and goats of day 2? Tim wasn't here yesterday, so we'll start
You have
with
to have
Tim.
one hero, one goat for each side.
One hero and one goat for each side.
And goat does not stand for greatest of all time. It's a bad.
Obviously, I'm going to say my goat is Daniel Edgar Sickles. I think that's a go-to goat. Maybe that's a cheap and easy,
pretty easy
way out of that answer. A hero on July 2nd. I don't think you can diminish the role of General Gouverneur Kimball Warren and his quick actions on July 2nd. But you know what? I'm going to give it to General Winfield Scott Hancock. The man seemed to be everywhere and do everything and order every successful counterattack on the field.
And Charlie
with a nice shirt on.
One of his regiments somehow ends up on Culp's Hill for a little while, too.
Right.
Yeah,
right?
So he's just very active.
Yes.
And really, really does a great job. So I'm gonna say him. And on the Confederate side, maybe it is Hood. Not just because he's wounded, but because just before he's wounded, he issued some or talked to Law and some of his commanders and gave them conflicting orders. And as soon as the attack began, it was already breaking down and troops were moving in different directions that they weren't supposed to. Like, for instance, the 1st Texas and 3rd Arkansas moving up the Emmitsburg Road when they had obviously changed that plan, and those 2 units didn't realize it. So he's too busy arguing about going around Big Round Top to get his unit together and make a cohesive attack, and then he's wounded, and then it loses all cohesion.
So does that make him your goat?
Yes,
or
that makes him my goat.
Okay.
And then so somebody who is a successful, General Benning. Because I just mentioned that Law doesn't command his brigade, Robertson doesn't command his brigade, Law doesn't command the division. Benning gets to the ridge at the base of Devil's Den, commands his troops, and then pulls together the Arkansas and Alabama troops and Texans troops in front of him, and they actually overrun and capture Devil's Den. So it's one of the more successful attacks on July 2nd.
Okay. How about you, James?
Agree with Tim on Sickles being the goat.
You got to put your microphone to your mouth. We're all getting tired. I didn't even realize it right away.
Sickles definitely the goat on the Union side. I like is the hero Vincent. Colonel Vincent,
yeah.
Just sitting here trying to think of him on the Confederate side. I can't think of too much on either way. That really sticks out to me.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll turn it over to Charlie.
All right, Charlie.
I'll go with the Confederates first. My heroes is Barksdale. Magnificent charge, breaks the Peach Orchard line, just keeps rolling. Just rolls, gets hit 3 times before they bring him down. Okay? One of the most magnificent charges of the war.
I guess he was right when he told Lee that Mississippi was ready at that meeting.
They were ready. Yeah. So he's my hero. My goat's Longstreet.
Really?
Yeah, his I guess attitude, if nothing else, the fact that he altered the plan significantly for whatever reason, and was unable to adjust to changing circumstances, insisting to attack up the Emmitsburg Road, even though the Union line is no longer where it was when that plan was made.
Okay.
He has done this before. He ruined the entire Confederate attack at Seven Pines and Fair Oaks by insisting on getting on the wrong road,
right,
and just ruined the whole attack there. So he's my goat. On the Union side, I'm going to go with Greene as my hero. Stemming off, 1,425 men, holding off nearly 5,000 for close to 3 hours. That to me is significant.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And remember, we talked yesterday about how they all said that Culp's Hill was the key to Cemetery Hill.
Right.
Okay, so he was holding the key to the key.
Yeah.
There, if you will. And I'm going to move a little bit this way, but my goat is Meade on July 2nd.
Ooh, he's moving away from Jim Pangler.
Away from Pangler.
I
Staring him
that
down.
for 2 reasons. One, it was his responsibility when Sickles is starting to send these messages back. It's clear that he doesn't know he doesn't want to do what you want him to.
Right.
So Meade should have taken the time and gone over there and talked to him before he got out in the orchard.
That's fair.
Okay, so it's ultimately his responsibility that Sickles was able to move out into the orchard. And also, the biggest mistake he made in his entire battle, he made on July 2nd. And that was ordering the entire 12th Corps off of Culp's Hill. Thank God it was late in the day, and darkness shielded that. And a Union officer said that in his report. The greatest mistake we made was vacating Culp's Hill and giving the Confederates a great opportunity. Lee's plan, such that it was, came very close to working on July 2nd.
Okay.
Came very close.
And Robert.
Oh, man. So I got to go 4th, huh?
Yeah.
And I can't use anything that you guys have used.
You could repeat.
Well, I would repeat. I would say Hancock. But anyway, as the goat, as the hero.
As the
for
hero.
Union forces, not the goat. But because I don't want to use others, I'm going to take Colonel David Ireland. Charlie will be happy for me, commanding that 137th New York for a hero. For the Confederate hero, Mclaws. He handled his division pretty well, didn't he?
Sure enough.
I think you could have gone with Anderson if one of our fellow guides who just loves Anderson was here. That's what we would just be saying. But Don Walters, are you here? Let's see. For the goats, I haven't done goats, have I?
No, not for the Union.
Not for the Confederates either, did I?
No.
Confederates? Do I dare say that Ewell doesn't attack early enough to pin the 12th Corps down over there? I'm stretching. There's other people I would take if it was my first choice.
What about Lee?
Yeah, I think we. Well, in that he's not having a meeting of all of his Corps commanders at any point, right? And he had basically the day on July 2nd to make sure there was communication. So I think you could say thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Pop. That's my Matmas gift to you.
Anything else come to you guys now that we've kind of gone through some?
There's a lot of cool things that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I'm still having trouble with a Confederate goat, but I'd have to say hero after I had a chance to think about it. Maybe Hayes and Avery over there on East Cemetery Hill, getting very close to the main Union supply line going uphill. But
yeah, and that hill isn't easy.
No,
to walk up with nobody shooting at you in broad daylight, and so to go up it under fire has got to be pretty tough at dark. But go ahead, I interrupted you.
No, I just nothing really sticks out to me as far as a Confederate goat on day 2.
Stuart.
Okay.
Oh, Stuart's a
Thank you, Bob. I'll go along with that.
You can't make him a
because
goat.
he's still not here. Yeah,
He's not here.
Thank you. That'll be my goat. Thank you very much,
Stuart. Yeah, because you, as you pointed out, that Ewell's got to use infantry brigades to cover his flank.
Right.
Yeah,
It is really hard to blame someone or to pick on someone because we read about these people all the time, and we read what kind of tough situations are all in, and as soon as I find myself criticizing somebody, I find myself putting myself in their place and thinking about some of the things that they were facing, and you feel for all the commanders. Sometimes luck has a role in battle. But, I wanted to ask something that I wonder if you guys think about. We're hit all the time on these stories. Well, what if this or what if that? And this one comes to mind, and I don't hear people talk about it enough. Let's say that Sickles doesn't move forward. Let's say Sickles just puts his line along Little Round Top and along Cemetery Ridge, and then Longstreet comes onto the field with Mclaws' division, and Mclaws moves out from Cemetery Ridge and turns his line perpendicular to Sickles' line here and starts moving up to Emmitsburg Road. Could that have happened? And then could have Sickles just fell on McLaws' flank?
Where's Hood?
Well,
Hood's supposed to be trailing them on the right, so you'd have Hood.
He would have to be smart enough to wait for Hood to pass by too.
There you go.
But I mean, what is the scenario if Sickles doesn't move forward and then the Confederates come up and try to charge up the Emmitsburg Road? That's my question, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Let's talk about the luck. There was an awful lot of luck. Shelby Foote titles his section in his Civil War book on Gettysburg, "The Stars in Their Courses." Like God himself was working against the Confederates there. So what are some luck changes?
Yeah. And Fonts, if you read Harry Fonts' The Second Day, somewhere towards the end of the book, he makes a really interesting analogy. He says that he's often been asked, who saved the day? And they're like, well, the 1st Minnesota saved the day when they charged, or the 20th Maine. A lot of people say it saved the day, or, Colonel Strong Vincent bringing his brigade to Little Round Top saved the day, or, the troops being ordered over to this position saved the day. And then he ends with, July 2nd was a day that required a lot of saving.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that line.
Yeah.
All right. So before we wrap it up here, night comes, fighting's over, Lee, Meade, what are they going to do? Meade has a Council of War, doesn't he? Or is that...
He does.
Yeah. Okay. What happens at the Council of War?
Yeah, well... he's going to ask the Corps commander certain questions. It's like the band Clash. Mm-hmm. Shall we stay or shall we go? This is all I want to know.
Yeah.
If we stay, there will be trouble. If we leave, it will be double.
Okay.
And so basically that's what he's asking.
Good.
And he's asking about supplies. Do we have enough supplies specifically?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have a good position? Should we alter it? Should we pull back, maybe behind Rock Creek? And all have their opinions. Slocum will say, don't do anything that even remotely resembles a retreat. Stay and fight it out. Just stay and hang in and fight it out. So Meade's trying to get a consensus of what his Corps commanders think, and one of the big concerns is supplies. They've been throwing a lot of lead around here. especially artillery ammunition. Okay, so that's the Corps commanders there with Meade, and so they're going to stick it out and hang in there for July 3.
At this point, the Union Army only controls 2 of the 10 to 12 roads that come in and out of Gettysburg.
Right.
When the day started, they had 3. They had the Emmitsburg Road, the Taneytown Road, which goes by Lee's headquarters, or Meade's headquarters, straight up to Cemetery Hill, and the Baltimore Pike, the main supply line. Of course, after the Confederate attack on the afternoon of the 2nd, the Emmitsburg Road is no longer usable. And as Calvin Covenauer likes to say, if you've got a 100,000-man army and hundreds of wagons and hundreds of cannons, thousands of wagons, and you've got to get out of town on just one road. Well, like I like to say, go down to Washington, D.C. on a Friday afternoon around 5 o'clock. Gridlock.
Yeah.
You got to have at least 2 roads open.
And those are
all
4-lane
times.
highways.
Yeah. So these 2 hills on either line of this, either side of this fishhook, control both those supply lines. Little Round Top controls Taneytown Road. Culp's Hill controls the Baltimore Pike. And then, the other thing that they had to decide, as Charlie said, they decide whether we want to stay or not, and the decision is to stay. Then the question becomes, do we seize the initiative, go over on the offensive, or do we continue on the defensive? And they determined to stay on the defensive. And then the question becomes, okay, how long do we stay on the defensive? Right. And it's determined they'll wait 24 hours. And they didn't have to wait that long, 1 o'clock the next
Jim, did Meade go into that Council of War uncertain of what to do?
I don't think so, but I think he wanted the backup of his Corps commanders. I think he had in his mind, but I think he wanted to be backed up by them.
Well, I think that's one of the issues. I think as tour guides, another thing we always struggle with is every person on our tour they know for a fact that Meade was fired after the battle, and they bring
where was Grant anyway?
And they talk about what a horrible job he did, and we end up being throughout the tour. I don't know about you guys, but subtly throughout the tour, I'll mention General Meade and things that he did throughout the battle to illustrate that he's doing a pretty good job. And then, of course, they're all convinced that he wants to retreat. And unfortunately, we have people who are believed to be scholars on the battle, Gelzo, who writes in his book that Meade wants to retreat, and he's talked out of it, and uses a horrible source for his analogy on that. But there's a lot of good sources of the Council of War, and I think that because he's asking questions, it gives the appearance to people that from the outside who are reading it that he doesn't already have in mind what he's going to do. But as Jim said, I think he knows what he wants to do. He just wants to hear it from all the other commanders. Remember, he's only been in charge of the army for 6 days.
Yeah.
And he had issued orders to all his Corps commanders to familiarize themselves with the roads in the area. And then Sickles tries to turn that against Meade after the battle and say, well, he wanted to leave. Now, Tim talked about something earlier. He said, Sickles was down here in this, how'd you say, Tim, he was the outlier, and he decides perhaps to move forward to initiate contact and bring on the fight so he gets involved. Well, what does he tell Lincoln? When Lincoln comes to his bedside on July 5th, he says, that guy you appointed to command a few days before the battle didn't want to fight the battle here, and only by my advancing out toward the Confederate line did I lure them into attacking and force me to stay and fight the battle. And it plants this in Lincoln's mind and other people's mind that Meade didn't even want to fight here.
So, unfortunately, the victor of the Battle of Gettysburg, who's only had his job for a few days, and we look around and think, well, he did, there are some issues with some things, but he did a pretty good job overall. Isn't today given the credit he deserves for the victory because of all these, ifs, ands, and buts. Now, I like what you said, Bob, earlier, if we can go back to that. So, people have continuously pointed to Meade's Council of War as a sign of weakness.
Yes.
And we have military, some of the tour guides have a military background. And Napoleon was totally against councils of war. And they'll say things like, councils of war never fight. Like, you're in charge, you make the decision. Because if you go and ask your other people, they're going to talk you out of whatever you were wanting to do. Like Meade was talked out of making the attack against Williamsport towards the end of the Gettysburg campaign. But think about this. Meade had this Council of War, all the Corps commanders who were left and guys in charge talked to each other about what they were going to do. And everyone on July 3rd in the Northern Army knew what the plan was and what was expected of them. And Lee never had a council of war during the battle. There was never a time when all his commanders were one place at one time and just look at what they thought about what each other should be doing. And, they were all over the place.
And
point.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, so the Council of War put everybody on the same page of the prayer book.
And at the end of the Council of War, what will Lee say to John Gibbon?
General Meade pulled his division commander in Union Center, and of course, this is according to the reminiscence of John Gibbon, which was published years later, I think, by his daughter. Gibbon said that Meade pulled him aside and said, "If Lee attacks tomorrow, it will be on your front." And of course, we use that time and again to say, "Wow, Meade is thinking that Lee might attack the Union Center on July 3rd and making preparations for that eventuality."
Where's the attack start on July 3rd? Not in the center.
Not in the center. So he's got the chronology a little bit mixed up.
That's all right.
No, it's good. But, there is that account. Now, if you read Gelzo, he dismisses that account as post-war,
Hooey.
Yeah, phooey.
Phooey, sorry.
Yeah. And if their listener doesn't understand, Alan Gelzo at Gettysburg College, who wrote a book a few years ago, The Last Invasion, 2013, I believe it came out. It's incredibly over-the-top anti-Meade.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so by this point on the Confederate side, what's Lee thinking he's going to do tomorrow?
Well, he has a plan to attack at dawn. Simultaneously, Longstreet. He said the plan remained unchanged. What is the plan? Take Cemetery Hill. So Longstreet now with Pickett will attack a Cemetery Hill, not a Little Round Top. Cemetery Hill, while Ewell attacks Culp's Hill first thing in the morning.
Okay. Is Longstreet supposed to use Hood and Mclaws, or just Pickett? Like, is it supposed to be?
Yeah, it's supposed to be the Corps.
The Corps.
Yeah.
Right.
Moving forward, those that he has to, because he's got to watch the flanks too. Till Stuart's going to swing around the other way. But be that as it may, that's a plan. The attack at dawn order is July 3rd, not the 2nd. And
you mean it's given on the 3rd?
It's given on the 3rd. This is where Early and others try to drag Longstreet down by saying it was the 2nd day. It's not. It's the 3rd day.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and this the problem is that Longstreet, when dawn comes, is not ready. He's trying to organize to go around as Hood wanted to do the day before, and all of a sudden you have the fighting on Culp's Hill. Whether it's initiated by the Union or the Confederates, Ewell's engaged by 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So we're going to leave it there. We've got one more of these to record tomorrow. Who's coming back for tomorrow? You coming, Jim?
I think I might be.
Okay.
Yeah, I won't be.
You won't be. Tim, you're coming. And Bob, you'll be here, of course,
I'll be
as
here.
well.
Jesse Wheelton, I think, might be
Jesse
coming.
Wheelton and Jim Hessler from the Battle of Gettysburg podcast will be here tomorrow as well. Yep. Okay, so anybody you want to take a tour with any of these guys that you hear on the show, Matt at addressinggettysburg.com, and I'll put you in touch with them. Thank you all for listening. This was a really long one, but it is an anniversary episode.
And wish Matt a happy Madness.
Well, yes.
Happy birthday.
Be long gone by then. It's my 42nd. I mean, who wants to remember that? Anyway, thank you all for listening, and thank you for sending your questions. And we got a lot more questions, but as you can see, these are long shows, and we don't have time to get to every question, so I just picked some of the more interesting ones. Not that any of them were bad, and that's it. Thank you all for listening.
Thanks.
Good night.
Wasn't John Fulton Reynolds 42 when he was killed?
Yes.
Oh man, you better watch your back, buddy.
That's right. Yeah, 21 twice.
Yeah, I only have 2 weeks left.